Okay, I see 7:29. I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar. We'll let folks start pouring in.
All right, I think it's about time to get started. Good evening and welcome to this public information sharing session and public hearing on Mexican wolf management. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Phil Sang. I'm president of DJ Case & Associates, and I'm moderator for tonight's session. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has contracted with DJ Case to provide logistical support and facilitation of tonight's session. I'm joined this evening by Rick Clausen, also from DJ Case, who's helping to look after the meeting platform and technical issues for this session. He'll also be helping with managing the list when we get to the public hearing portion. But aside from Rick and me, everyone else you'll see and hear at tonight's meeting is from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we will introduce them shortly. But first, since we're meeting in the virtual space instead of in person, I'd like to take a few minutes to explain how this session is going to work. Thank you, Rick. Tonight's session has two parts. First part is information sharing. Staff from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will present information on proposed changes to the 10J rule, and then there will be opportunity for you to ask questions about anything that was presented. The second half of the meeting, from 7 to 9 p.m. Mountain Time, will be the public hearing, the chance for you to make formal comments on the proposed rule for the record. Here's the agenda for the meeting. I'll start by explaining the format and the ground rules. Next, representatives from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will introduce themselves. Then Amy Luters, who is the Regional Director for the Interior Regions 6 and 8, will provide opening remarks to set the stage. Following that, Tracy Melbahes, who's the Mexican Wolf Policy Coordinator, will make a presentation to give an overview of the proposed rule. After the presentation, we'll conduct a Q&A session for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff to answer any questions you may have about the proposed changes as presented. We will take a quick break at 6:45 Mountain Time, and then starting at 7, we will conduct a formal hearing in which we look forward to hearing your comments on the Mexican wolf proposed rule. We are on a Zoom webinar tonight, so we have a few quick ground rules that we need to pass along. Number one, this session is being recorded and a transcript will be posted on the Mexican Wolf Recovery website within 3 business days. So if you know anyone who could benefit from this information, but who couldn't participate today, please share the link, which we will post shortly. 2, participant microphones and video are turned off for the presentation. 3, we'll take questions and provide answers for about 45 minutes, depending on how long the presentation goes before the hearing starts. If you have questions and you're joining us online, please submit them one at a time by clicking the Q&A button, which you can find at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom toolbar. Please do not submit multiple questions in a single screen. It makes it very difficult to manage the Q&A session. Please be respectful when asking questions. We don't anticipate any problems here, but note that if you use profanity or inappropriate language, we reserve the right to dismiss the question and move on. If you're joining us on the phone, we will have separate instructions for how to ask your questions at the beginning of the Q&A session. At the end of the Q&A session, we'll take a 15-minute break and then start the formal comment hearing period, as I mentioned, at 7. The formal comment period will last for 2 hours, and we'll take as many verbal comments as we can within that 2-hour time frame. We have assembled a list of everyone who registered and indicated that they wanted to provide a formal comment. We will proceed through that list in the order registered, and if there's time available, we will provide an opportunity for anyone who did not register but who would like to testify to provide their comments. We'll provide instructions for how that session will run at the beginning of the hearing right after the break. Captioning is available for this session. You can view captioning by clicking on the CC button on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. The posted recording will also be captioned if that's helpful to review it again later. I know that's a lot of instructions to take in just a few minutes, but don't worry, we'll go over all the instructions for submitting questions and providing comments again after the presentation. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Brady McGee, who's the Wolf Recovery Coordinator with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to kick us off. Brady?
Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Brady McGee. I am the Mexican Wolf Recovery Coordinator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Joining me today are Amy Luters, Regional Director for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Albuquerque, Tracy Melbajes, our Mexican Wolf Policy Coordinator, Maggie Dwyer, our Deputy Mexican Wolf Recovery Coordinator, and John Oakleaf, our Mexican Wolf Field Projects Coordinator. This evening, we will provide an overview of the service's proposed changes to the management regulations for Mexican wolves in the Mexican wolf experimental population area in Arizona and New Mexico under Section 10J of the Endangered Species Act. Our press release, frequently asked questions, the following slide deck, and additional information are available on our website at the link on your screens. We will share the slide again at the end of the meeting. With that, I would like to turn it over to Regional Director Amy Luters to begin the information session.
Well, thank you very much, Brady, for that introduction. And thanks to all of you who joined us today to take time out of your evening for this session this evening. I do want to make sure to thank the participation of our elected officials and their staff in our session tonight. So thank you all for joining us. And before we get into the details of the proposed rule revision, I would like to first acknowledge our Mexican wolf recovery partners. Throughout this process, we have collaborated closely with the states of Arizona and New Mexico, as well as many federal, local, and tribal partners. We invited 60 cooperating agencies to serve, 60 agencies to serve as cooperating agencies during this process. On this screen, you'll see the 24 who accepted and signed the memorandums of understanding to serve as cooperating agencies. During nearly a dozen meetings with these cooperating agencies, we developed and provided working drafts of the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. We solicited feedback and incorporated recommendations to the maximum extent possible. We also met several times with the Mexican Wolf Tribal Working Group, a working group open to all tribes, and attended other tribal coordination meetings to discuss the rule revision. I want to thank these partners for their time, expertise, and support in drafting a rule that, if finalized, will bring our management actions in line with our recovery goals for the Mexican wolf. Recovering the Mexican wolf remains a top priority for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we continue to make steady progress toward this goal. The wild population of Mexican wolves in the United States saw its 5th consecutive year of growth in 2020. With a minimum of 186 Mexican wolves in the wild, the population is the largest it's ever been. We are now in the process of preparing for the 2021 count and hope to have good news to share on that front in the coming months. In a moment, Tracy will give you an in-depth overview of the specific changes being proposed in the 10J rule, but I really want to start with two key takeaways. First, the 2017 Mexican Wolf Recovery Plan will continue to serve as our roadmap for recovery. And second, this proposed 10J revision will not lessen our ability to manage for conflicts on the landscape. The service and the Mexican Wolf Interagency Field Team will continue to work diligently to prevent, reduce, and compensate for negative economic impacts felt by affected stakeholders. With that, I'll turn things over to Tracy Malbahas.
All right, thank you, Amy, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Let me wait, do we have the slides up? There we go. Okay, I'd like to start with just a little bit of background on the Mexican wolf and our conservation efforts under the Endangered Species Act, in case that's helpful as we get into talking about the proposed 10J revisions. So the Mexican wolf is the rarest subspecies of gray wolf in North America, and it was once common in portions of the southwestern United States, but it was all but eliminated from the wild by the 1970s. And then in 1976, the Mexican wolf was listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. And this is a timeline. It can be found on our website, and it shows some of the key milestones and regulatory actions for this program. So two dates that I'll just highlight quickly are 1977, when recovery efforts for the Mexican wolf really began with the effort to establish a captive population. And then moving forward in 1998, when we were able to begin reintroducing Mexican wolves to the wild from captivity. And then at the bottom of the timeline, you can see some of the major management actions that have supported the Mexican wolf recovery effort along the way. And that includes the development of the 2015 10J rule, which revised that original 1998 designation of the Mexican wolf experimental population area. And it's that 2015 10J rule for which we're proposing revisions. Then this slide provides a quick review of the process to revise the 2015 10J rule that got us here today, namely that in 2018, a federal judge remanded portions of the 2015 10J rule to the service. And so in continuation of this process, we will be working with partners to meet our deadline of delivering a final revised 10J rule by July 1st of 2022. Okay, on this slide, you can see a map that shows the Mexican wolf experimental population area, and it consists of the portions of Arizona and New Mexico that are south of Interstate 40. Within the experimental population area, there are 3 management zones, and those management zones establish areas for the release of Mexican wolves from captivity, as well as areas for translocating wild wolves from one location to another. And I'll note that the geographic boundaries of the Mexican wolf experimental population area and the management zones will not be affected by our proposed revisions. Okay, I'll now shift gears to start talking about our current action to revise the management regulations for the Mexican wolf experimental population area. So the purpose of an experimental population under the Endangered Species Act is to contribute to the conservation and recovery of the species. And the court's remand of our 2015 10J rule has required the service to ensure that several specific features of the experimental population designation do indeed provide for the long-term conservation and recovery of the Mexican wolf. And so these features include the population size and the genetic needs of the population, as well as ensuring that the management actions that we allow are protective of genetic diversity. And then in addition, the remand also requires a fresh essentiality determination under Section 10J of the Endangered Species Act. So the proposed rule that we recently published contains the following elements that would become part of the experimental population designation. And they include a revised population objective, a new genetic objective, the temporary restriction of 3 of our existing take provisions, and again, a fresh essentiality determination. So I'll talk through each of these this evening. These proposed revisions are intended to bring the management of the experimental population into alignment with the 2017 Mexican Wolf Recovery Plan. And the recovery plan is our document that provides our long-term vision and strategy and goals for Mexican wolf recovery. And as some of you are aware, there was a recent court ruling that remanded part of the recovery plan back to the service. So we are moving forward to respond to that ruling. But what's important for this process is that the judge did not remand any part of the recovery criteria back to the service. And so therefore we are moving forward with our proposed 10J rule revisions to align the management of wolves in the wild with the recovery plan, while we simultaneously but separately address that recovery plan court ruling. So the first revision that I will briefly discuss is the population objective. The population objective describes how many wolves we will manage for in the experimental population, and it's intended to ensure that the population is robust in size and has a low risk of extinction. We're proposing to manage for an average of greater than or equal to 320 wolves in the Mexican wolf experimental population area. And this will align with our recovery criteria for the Mexican wolf in the revised recovery plan. And this proposed revision would remove the upper limit of 325 wolves that our 2015 10J regulations currently specify. Next, we are proposing a genetic objective for the Mexican wolf experimental population area. And the genetic objective describes how many wolves we will release from captivity into the wild to improve the population's gene diversity and alleviate genetic threats such as inbreeding. And the reason that releasing wolves from captivity improves gene diversity in the experimental population is because Mexican wolves in the captive population have genes that are not currently represented in the wild. So we're proposing to release enough wolves from captivity such that at least 22 survive to breeding age. Breeding age for Mexican wolves is about 2 years old. And then as with the population objective, this genetic objective also aligns with our recovery criteria for the Mexican wolf in the revised recovery plan. The next few revisions in our proposed 10J rule that I will discuss occur in our take provisions. And our take provisions are essentially management actions that allow for the take of Mexican wolves. So we're proposing to restrict 3 of our existing take provisions until the proposed genetic objective is achieved. These 3 take provisions currently provide us with potential management flexibility to address conflict situations, but they could lead to the take of released wolves and therefore hinder our progress to improve the genetic diversity of the population. So the 3 take provisions that we are proposing to temporarily restrict are take on federal land, take on non-federal land, and take in response to an unacceptable impact to a wild ungulate herd. Currently, our take provisions for federal land and non-federal land allow the service to issue permits to livestock operators to take a Mexican wolf in specific situations. So we're proposing to restrict the issuance of those permits based on a conditional annual process. So under our proposal, take permits on federal and non-federal land would be issued to livestock operators in a year ahead only if the service met our proposed annual benchmark for the number of released wolves surviving to breeding age in the previous year, or if we did not meet our benchmark, but permitted take in the previous year did not include released wolves. So our intention with this conditional permitting proposal is to ensure that permits as a form of management flexibility may be utilized, but only consistent with the progress that we're making toward recovery. And then this is a restriction that would be lifted when we meet the proposed genetic objective. And it's important to note here that the service could use other provisions in the rule to manage wolf livestock conflict situations during those years when permits would not be issued to livestock operators. And the third take provision that we are proposing to temporarily restrict, which is take in response to an unacceptable impact to a wild ungulate herd, currently allows the state game and fish agencies to request the removal of wolves if wolf predation is having an unacceptable impact. So we're proposing to restrict this provision completely until the genetic objective is met. And at that time, then the restriction would be lifted. So the last piece of the proposed 10J rule is the proposed essentiality determination. So this determination excuse me, is necessitated by Section 10J of the Endangered Species Act. And essentially it requires a determination of whether an experimental population is essential to the continued existence of a listed species. We determined that the experimental population was non-essential in 1998 when we began reintroducing Mexican wolves to the wild. And so we've now updated our determination as the court required. And based on the current abundance and distribution of Mexican wolves, we still find the experimental population to be non-essential. And however, non-essential does not mean unimportant, because as we've stated, the success of the experimental population in the Mexican wolf experimental population area is important for the recovery of the Mexican wolf. All right, I'll now switch gears to the documents that are out for public review and comment. So in addition to the proposed revised 10J rule, we also developed a draft supplemental environmental impact statement under the National Environmental Policy Act. As Amy mentioned, we worked with 24 cooperating agencies to analyze the impacts of our proposed revisions to land use, human health and public safety, biological resources, economic activity, and environmental justice. And the draft supplemental environmental impact statement includes 3 alternatives, as you can see in the infographic here. Alternative 1 is our proposed action and preferred alternative, and it includes each of the revisions that I've just described. Alternative 2 is a variation of alternative 1 that does not include the temporary restriction of the 3 take provisions. And then alternative 3 is the no action alternative, which in this context would be to maintain the existing regulations from the 2015 10J rule without revision. And then this infographic provides a little bit more detail on our process to revise the management regulations from the time the 10J rule was remanded to us in 2018 over on the left of the screen, to the completion of the process over on the right side there at July 1st of 2022 with a final rule. And you'll notice the red box highlighting our current action where we are now in the process to hold public meetings, hearings, and also conduct our peer review. Our agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is committed to providing robust opportunities for meaningful public participation in this rulemaking process. The proposed rule published in the Federal Register on October 29th, and the 90-day public comment period will end on January 27th, 2022. And we kind of kicked off the process with a public information session, which was on November 18th. And now the service is holding 2 additional information sessions followed by public hearings, the one tonight, December 8th, as well as a second one on January 11th. And this will be one of the mechanisms that we use to gather public comments for the record. And then in addition to participation in these events, There are also 2 ways to provide written comments for the record. You can submit your comments online through regulations.gov using the docket number on the screen. And I'll read that out loud for anybody on the phone. The docket number is docket FWS, as in Fish and Wildlife Service. So FWS-R2-ES-2021-0103. Or when you're in regulations.gov, you can also type Mexican wolf into the search bar and find it that way. And then the second way that you can submit comments is through a hard copy in the mail to the address that is on the screen. And I'll also read this out loud, but I'll note that it is available on our website as well. But the address to mail your public comments to is Public Comments Processing on the first line. The second line, attention, and that'll be the docket number again, FWS-R2-ES-2021-0103. And the third line is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The fourth line is MS as in mail stop, PRB /3W. And then the fifth and sixth lines of the address are the street and city. So that's 5275 Leesburg Pike, LEESBURG, Leesburg Pike in Falls Church, Virginia, 22041. So after reviewing all of the comments received during the public review and comment period, including the scientific peer review, we will continue working with our partners and all of our cooperating agencies and tribes to publish a final rule by July 1st of 2022. And I believe now we are ready to take questions.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Just a couple of quick reminders that this first portion of tonight's session is not the formal hearing, but rather it's a chance for you to ask questions, as Tracy mentioned. Anything that she mentioned in the presentation, you have questions about that, now's the time. We will ask for formal comments, the hearing starting at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. All participants are muted and in listen-only mode during this section. And if you have a question and you're online, click the Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please enter and submit just one question at a time. If you're on the phone, you need to press *9 to raise your hand. That will show us that you have a question, and we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. When we call on your number, we will enable you to unmute by pressing *6. Please state your name and ask your question at that point. Recall, this is not a hearing, so we're not taking comments yet, only questions about the information we presented. And whether you're on the phone or online, we ask that you keep the questions as brief and succinct as possible so we can hopefully answer everyone's questions in the time we have available before the public hearing starts. Okay, I think with that, we are ready for some questions, and I see some coming into the Q&A.
And for situational awareness, so that everybody knows, I'm going to be reading the questions. I will attempt to answer some of the questions or parts of the questions, and I will be passing along other parts to different participants on the panel, or I might even pass the whole question over to them. But I think our first question is up. And the first question is, so based on your comments, if a livestock producer is experiencing depredation from a known wolf, no permit for removal can be issued for its removal unless the U.S. Forest Service meets its population goals, or its USFS is, I assume, Forest Service, but maybe it was meant to be Fish and Wildlife Service. The depredation will just have to be tolerated by the producer. So with that, I am going to maybe turn that one over to John Oakley, the field projects coordinator, to answer that.
Well, I think maybe there was a little bit of confusion there, but certainly there are ways to manage depredations that we will continue to have as the field team. So the specific actions that were talked about in the rule were related to the permits and some restrictions that may or may not be in place based on the population. But for the field team, with depredations, we will actively manage depredations and continue to do either preventative, proactive projects, which are to try to prevent depredations to begin with. And then we do hazing and diversionary food caches, those kind of things to prevent depredations after they have occurred. And we'll also do trapping. And if it gets severe enough, we may do translocations or removals. And nothing in the changes alters what the field team can do. And so I want to be clear about that. And then I'll turn it over back to Tracy in terms of the specific rule revision for maybe some clarification.
Sure. Yeah, so just one clarification would be that these are temporary restrictions in place until the service would meet the proposed genetic objective specifically, which is different than the population objective. And we think based on the benchmarks that we've set that we can achieve the genetic objective probably within 8 years, potentially sooner. Again, it depends on the length of time that it takes for at least 22 released wolves to survive to breeding age. So as Brady said, during those handful of years, or as John said, sorry, during that handful of years where the permits are restricted in certain situations, there are still other tools for the agencies to continue to manage depredations. So no, the depredation does not just have to be tolerated by the producer. And I'm not sure about for anybody else, but I just want to say this before we go any further. It could just be my computer, but John, you were a little bit soft for me, so I'm not sure if you've got a volume you can maybe crank up a little bit if anybody else thought you were a little soft too.
I thought so too.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thanks, John. Thanks, Tracy. Second question, why are the Mexican wolves considered not essential? And I'm going to hand that over to Tracy to answer that.
Okay. Nope. Yeah, I'm still on. All right. Yeah, so again, the question of essentiality kind of is based on whether or not the population is essential to the continued survival of the species. And so when we started the reintroduction in 1998, obviously we were able to start the reintroduction because we had a robust captive population. So at that time, our thinking was that if we put wolves out in the wild and they did not survive, that we would be able to restart the reintroduction again using wolves from captivity. And so, certainly, I think, we kind of assume that this determination is made at the beginning of a reintroduction effort or the beginning of when an experimental population is designated. So it is a little bit of an odd position to be already, a decade or two or more underway and be making kind of the determination again, but really based on the fact that obviously we do have a flourishing population in the wild now, as well as the fact that there are wolves in Mexico. There's a population of about 40 wolves based on the reintroduction efforts that Mexico has undertaken since 2010. And we do also still have the captive population. So we kind of do still have that same perspective that if for some reason things were to change in the wild and the population was to decline drastically, we could continue to use wolves from captivity to get the reintroduction going again.
Thanks, Tracy. Our next question is, who will be responsible for the mitigation of predation of wildlife and livestock, and who will be funding said mitigation? Will there be more people hired to do this work? So this is a multi-part question where there's asking about mitigation of predation of wildlife. And as part of our proposed rule changes right now, we are proposing to limit take in regards to impacts to wild ungulates until we meet our genetic goals. However, I will say that there are several studies being conducted by both Arizona Game and Fish and New Mexico Game and Fish, currently looking at all predation within the range of our Mexican wolves throughout Southwest New Mexico and southeastern Arizona. One of the things that is out there, there's about 40 to 60,000 elk within this area. And we currently have a minimum population of around 186 wolves. You know, we probably have a few more than that out there. But when you have so few wolves and so many elk, it's really not, we're not seeing any impacts to the wild ungulate herds at this time, and probably won't anytime in the near future, especially by the time we reach our genetic goals. And elk is the primary prey base of wolves. They do eat deer and other ungulates, other animals, but 85% of the diet of wolves is made up of elk. And so with an abundance of elk out there and the minimum number of wolves, we're not really expecting to see a limitation. We have a take provision within the 10J that allows for take in regards to unacceptable impacts to wild ungulates. And so we don't really expect to experience that until the population of wolves are at a much higher level. And by then we would have reached our genetic goals, and therefore this probably won't be an issue that we'll have to address in reality. The other part of this question is mitigation of predation of livestock. We have several compensation programs in place. We have the livestock demonstration grants that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service administers to states and tribes that have wolves and the Florida panther. States and tribes can apply for this grant every year, and this is the primary grant that we use to compensate ranchers in Arizona and New Mexico for their livestock losses. There's also the Farm Service Agency Livestock Indemnity Program that ranchers can apply for as well. And so there are a few compensation programs out there to offset some of the impacts and predation on livestock. And the last question of this, will there be more people hired to do this work? If funding becomes more available throughout the program for all the agencies that are involved in recovery of Mexican wolves, we would like to hire more people, but that also depends on available funding coming through state governments, federal government, etc. So managing livestock depredations is one of the most important things about our program, and trying to reduce conflicts and livestock conflicts and depredations will always be one of our top priorities. As our population grows, we will be able to open up more tools within our toolbox to be able to offset some of those impacts. And we're seeing some pretty significant growth within our population in the last few years, and expect to continue to do so. So even if we don't get more people, we have many tools in the toolbox that we can use to help offset some of those impacts. So next question is, the 2017 recovery plan was modeled to align with the 2015 rule that found by the court to be unscientific and insufficient to lead to recovery. By association, this would seem to render the recovery plan unscientific and insufficient to achieve recovery. Now, the revised rule is being designed to align back to the recovery plan. So this seems scientifically flawed. How can this circular alignment be justified? So I'll attempt to answer the first part of this question, then I'm going to turn the rest over to Tracy to follow up. And I will be one of the first to admit that the Fish and Wildlife Service kind of put the cart before the horse in this situation. Typically what we would like to do as an agency, whether it's Mexican wolves or any other listed species out there, we would like to write the recovery plan first, have it be as scientifically robust and sound as possible. The recovery plan is the guiding document that tells us what species needs to be recovered off the endangered species list. And typically you would have that plan set in place first. And in 1982, we had a recovery plan that really didn't have the criteria in there that outlined the goals of what that would take. And we had a few goals that kind of said, well, let's just get to 100 wolves and then we'll kind of reevaluate and see what we need from there. And then we came in 1998, we started this reintroduction project under Section 10J of the Endangered Species Act. And one of the reasons we do this program under Section 10J is to lessen the regulations of the act, the prohibitions of the act, so that we can more effectively manage and have more tools to manage a predator that eats livestock and create social tolerance on the landscape. And so we are trying to manage under 10J so that we will can have more of those management options in place to do things with an endangered species. And in 1998, we started this reintroduction under 10J. In 2015, we revised the 10J, but we still didn't have a recovery plan in place. Part of the 2015 revision was a court-ordered mandate. And at that time, the Mexican wolf was listed as a species, part of the species of the gray wolf. 2015, we revised that listing as a subspecies listing, and particularly for Mexican gray wolves. And we revised the 10J rule, which we're having to redo some tweaks again now, but we still didn't have a recovery plan in place. We should have had a recovery plan in place by then, but the way court-ordered deadlines came along, we did the 2015 recovery plan, did our 2015 10J rule, tried to write in a few of our, what recovery might look like, but the 10J is basically a tool in order to get to recovery. It is not, or 10J is not the implement that tells us what recovery is. That is the recovery plan. So because we've been kind of through the courts and kind of back and forth, putting the cart before the horse here, our wheels are spinning, trying to get everything aligned back in place. But the 2017 recovery plan was put together and gave us the roadmap for what it would take to reach recovery of Mexican wolves. It was scientifically based with the most robust science that we had at the time. And so now we're trying, with this court mandated revision to the 2015 rule, trying to align the aspects of this revision up with that recovery plan. So with that, I will let Tracy kind of smooth out and polish off the rest of the answer.
Yeah, I'll just hit on a couple things. I mean, yeah, Brady certainly went through kind of the tangled path that we have had to get here, unfortunately. But I think the commenter was kind of asking about the connection between some of the analysis that had happened in the 2017 recovery plan. And so there was a population viability analysis that supported the development of our recovery criteria. And we basically started with some already published scientific population viability modeling that was available to us and from prior recovery planning efforts. And we did look at the 2015 rule in terms of how many releases we would put out into the population to achieve our various goals. And we kind of found that in order to get to what we consider to be recovery for the Mexican wolf, that we needed more releases and a slightly different population structure for recovery than what we had in the 2015 10J rule. And so that is why, again, we are now trying to align these revisions with the modeling that came out of that effort.
Thank you, Tracy. The next question we have is, who are your scientific reviewers and are they unbiased body of scientists? Will the scientific peer review documents be available for public comment? And I'm going to turn that over to Tracy for an answer.
Okay. We don't know who our scientific reviewers are, so we're utilizing a process that is an independent selection of peer reviewers. And so there's a system set up nationally in the Fish and Wildlife Service where we have a contract with various contractors who go out and select peer reviewers for us based on what type of review is needed. And so we indicate what type of expertise reviewers should have, and then that review occurs without us knowing who has been selected. So don't know who our reviewers are other than they are experts with qualifications in demography, genetics, captive populations, carnivores, and all of those relevant types of topics. And so are they unbiased? Yeah, certainly, to the extent that, again, they've been selected through a rigorous process. We certainly hope that they are. And will the scientific peer review be available for public comment? So when the peer review comes in, we will post those reviews up probably on our website as soon as possible. And so I think that that will occur before the public comment period ends.
Thanks,
In other words,
Tracy.
the peer reviewers had a shorter amount of time than the public does. So just to clarify. Sorry, Brady.
That's okay. Thanks, Tracy. Next question, can you please provide a summary of the analysis you used to support the maintenance of the non-essential experimental designation of the population? Tracy, would you take that?
Sure. So analysis, if you're thinking of something like a population viability analysis or structured decision making or those types of kind of scientifically bounded types of analyses, we did not use anything like that for our proposed determination that the population remains non-essential. It was rather, not exactly sure what to call it, but a thought exercise, again, of looking at the current abundance and distribution, not only in the US, but also the progress that Mexico has made in the wild, as well as still the remaining robustness of the captive population, which right now is about 350 wolves or slightly more than that in about 50 institutions.
Thanks, Tracy.
Sure.
Our next question is, can a livestock owner harass or take a wolf if caught in the act of killing livestock? And under our 10J, we have different sort of management stipulations for take of wolves based on where the wolf is located. So on private land, a livestock owner can harass or take a wolf that is caught in the act of killing livestock on their private land, and they can do so without a permit. On federal land, we are trying to recover wolves on federal land. And so on federal land, a livestock permittee or livestock owner would need a permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service in order to take a Mexican wolf that is in the act of biting or killing their livestock on federal land. And so I maybe ask John Oakley, our field projects coordinator, to follow up with more specifics on that. So John?
No, that's absolutely right. That's one of the key changes that Tracy highlighted, in that we have to meet certain genetic standards to issue the permit on federal lands for taking the act. Am I correct, Tracy? I want to see the nod coming, but yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're looking at modified. So if we hit those standards via genetic criteria, then we'll still be able to issue those permits in the future. And so that's what we're looking at. And one of the things is a little tweak from what the 2015 current rule says.
Thanks, John. Next question, is it normal for the peer review process to be concurrent with the public comment process? If peer reviewers point out significant flaws in the rule, will it be revised and put out to public comment again? And I can answer the first part, but then turn it over to Tracy for answering the second part. Because it's been a large part of my career in the recovery program in the regional office, doing all kinds of peer review, public comment processes for rulemakings, for recovery plans, for everything. And the peer review process concurrent with the public comment process is normal. It's something that we normally do. And if the peer reviewers point out significant flaws in the rule, will it be revised and put out for public comment again? If the peer reviewers point out significant flaws such that we are changing the way the final rule, the outcome of the final rule, we could possibly put that out there again for public comment and revision. That rarely ever happens though. But anything more you want to add to that, Tracy?
No, I think that's good.
Alrighty, then we'll move on to the next question. Is who determined the limit of 320 individuals and why? And so I may turn that over to Tracy to discuss the recovery plan.
Okay, thanks, Brady. So one clarification is that 320 is not a limit, especially if you're thinking of it in the sense that the 2015 10J rule had a limit of 325. So our 320 here is different. So what we're proposing is that we would manage for an average of greater than or equal to 320. So that means that we basically want the population to kind of hover around this number of 320. And we know that, you know, it may be a little bit below it, it may get above it. In order to really sustain that average of 320, it will probably need to be above 320. And that number again comes from the 2017 recovery plan, where we collaborated with federal and state agencies, Mexico, as well as some academic experts, and did a lot of basically computer modeling, population viability modeling, using data from our program to try and determine what size does a population need to be robust. And by robust, we mean that it has a low risk of extinction. And our standard there was that we want the population to have a 90% chance of persisting for 100 years. And so when we see a population that has those qualities to it, then we consider it to be adequate to be considered under the Endangered Species Act. So again, the 320 came from the recovery planning effort back in 2017.
Thank you, Tracy. Our next question is, will you move the court to extend the deadline by 60 days so that the public comment period can be extended for 60 days to allow the public to consider the 2019 and 2020 annual reports and the 2021 end of year count and the public comment periods? So to answer that, we do not intend to go back to the court for any further extensions of the deadline of the 10J. I'm happy to announce that we were able to post the 2019 annual report on our website today. We will not be completing the 2020 and possibly the 2021 annual reports until sometime next summer. The last few years, we have fallen behind in completion of our annual reports. The main reason being is that in prior years, prior to us doing cross fosters, the April-May timeframe was when our field team spent a large portion of their time working on the end of year reports and the annual reports. However, with cross fosters in the last few years, during that timeframe, we have not been able to work on the annual reports. And then the rest of the year has been filled up with our other normal activities. We've had a large number of depredations over the last few years of trying to manage those, to you name it, and just haven't been able to have the staff power to work on our annual reports simply because in years past we did it in the April-May timeframes, and now all that time is filled with us trying to do cross fosters, and yet some of the genetic diversity from captivity out into the wild population. And so we won't be extending our court deadline on this, but we will continue to diligently try to catch up with these reports. We are looking at revamping our database system so that we can, and for our 2020 and 2021 annual reports, so that we can manage the data more efficiently and produce the reports quicker and catch up on these reports. But we won't be postponing the 10J revision for these. So next question is, what is the criteria for an incident to be considered depredation of livestock? How is a predation event confirmed in Arizona and New Mexico? So I'm going to turn that over to John Oakleaf to answer.
Thanks, Brady. Appreciate that. So a depredation incident is a confirmed livestock kill. It can be more than one carcass in the same 24-hour period in the same area. So sometimes it can be more than one on rare occasions for a depredation incident. The Wildlife Services, one of our partner agency, conducts investigations on livestock. And for them to confirm it, there has to be physical evidence of wolves killing the livestock, which relates to subcutaneous hemorrhaging on the animal. And that shows the wolves are biting the livestock when it was alive and not just scavenging on livestock. So that's basically the answer.
Thanks, John. Our next question is, why did the Fish and Wildlife Service ignore the request of dozens of eminent wildlife biologists and in an October 2019 letter to the service that requested that one of the alternatives to be examined in the EIS specifically foster recovery, including resuming the successful releases of family packs of wolves from captivity to the wild, and requirements that livestock owners take responsibility for removing or rendering unpalatable carrion from non-wolf killed stock in order to prevent conflicts, and other key recommendations. And so maybe I'll turn this over to Tracy to provide an answer.
Sure. So we did not ignore those recommendations. We did think about them, and one of the places that you can see that is in the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. There's a section toward the beginning of the document where we kind of collated a lot of the types of recommendations that came in through public scoping on what types of alternatives or what features of alternatives we could have and analyze in the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. And so essentially, you know, as we've talked about tonight, we've had some success with cross-fostering of puppies from captivity to the wild, but our rule still allows us to conduct adult releases of individuals, pairs, or family groups. And so what we want to do as we move forward, you know, is to maintain flexibility in what types of releases we can conduct. And currently our zone management certainly allows for flexibility in releases, but we also want to work within the techniques that we're having success with and that are successful with outreach and with our partners and other types of you know, concerns that we need to accommodate to have a kind of well-rounded, balanced program. And so then let's see, the second part of that had to do with removing livestock carcasses. And again, that's also discussed in that same part of the EIS, where certainly that can be a very positive management action at times. There are times when that's helpful and times when it isn't, and certainly the Forest Service is taking some action in specific areas to start working on that. But to mandate it all the time, one is a little bit outside of our purview, but it also just kind of doesn't give us the flexibility that we need to be able to manage across the entire area. And John, do you have anything more there that you want to add in terms of sometimes the use of those carcasses? Or
Well, for sure. I think you covered the most part of it, but there's certainly timeframes where it may be smart to move livestock around, but it's managed by the Forest Service, and those livestock continue to be owned even following death by the permittee. And so it's a voluntary action that we do on the landscape in collaboration, like many of our actions, in collaborations with permittees. And B, there's certain times of year where you want to do that. But there's also certain areas where you would never be able to remove a livestock carcass without quartering it and packing it on your shoulders, or using fire, dynamite, those kind of things. And there's seasons where you wouldn't want to do that because you'd start a forest fire. So the flexibility that Tracy talked about is really important in managing wolves in this particular issue itself.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, John. Our next question is, why are captive wolves considered different, or rather more diverse genetically, when they are supposed to be from the 3 original lineages, Aragon, McBride, and Ghost Ranch? How does it make any difference to their inbreeding at all, and why limit control and mitigation? And so to answer this one, I'm going to turn it over to Maggie Dwyer, who oversees our captive facility program. So Maggie.
Thanks, Brady. Yes, so all Mexican wolves alive today, whether they're in the captive populations or the wild populations, they are all descendants from those original 3 lineages. So by that point, that question's correct. There's a couple different reasons why the captive population retains more genetic diversity than the wild population. One of those is that in the captive population, we do kind of prescribed breeding. We get to pick which animals breed. So we pick the animals that will produce offspring that will serve to improve or actually slow the loss of gene diversity in the captive population. In the wild population, we obviously don't have that control. And one of the things we experienced early on with the growth of our wild population is that a couple of the originally or new or early released wolves were really successful. They bred and had a lot of offspring. And so for an extended period of time, longer than 10 years, almost every breeding animal in the wild population was related to only 1 or 2 wolves. And so the wild population kind of more quickly became inbred, while the captive population, we were making efforts to make them more outbred. So that's why there's the difference in gene diversity. I don't know that I understand the remaining part of the question. How does it make any difference to their inbreeding? Maybe I answered that. Because we can make an effort to do outbreeding in the captive population, but we don't control that in the wild. And then the limit of control and mitigation, I assume that's related to our desire to try not to take wolves in the wild that are genetically, quote, valuable or considered unrelated to the other wolves in the wild population, because we do want those animals to survive and reproduce, and thus make the wild population as diverse as the captive population. So I hope I answered that. If not, throw another question in the chat and we'll get back to it.
Thanks, Maggie. Our next question is, what happens to the wolves in the meantime during the various deadlines, since they are listed as non-essential? And I'll attempt on the first part of this, but then maybe get Tracy to help follow up here. When the judge remanded parts of the decision and the 2015 rule that we're trying to revise right now, the judge left the 2015 rule in place and left it effective. And so we are managing right now under that 2015 rule. Since the reintroduction began in 1998, through current time. The wolves within the Mexican wolf experimental population area have been designated as non-essential. As Tracy said a little bit earlier, that doesn't mean that they aren't important. It's just a designation status under the Section 10J of the Act that Fish and Wildlife has to determine as part of the rule. So Tracy, do you want to follow up on this question, Annie, or not sure kind of what the question is getting at?
No, I think you handled it, just that we will continue to manage under the 2015 10J rule until this rule, the revised rule, is finalized in July. So we will just keep on moving and keep on managing as we do both this revision as well as the recovery plan.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, why were there not 4 alternatives developed in the draft supplemental EIS? It is just the preferred alternative and a lesser action alternative. It seems like an additional alternative that included a more thorough analysis of all the flaws identified by the court order should have been included as a higher level of conservation actions above the preferred alternative. So for that answer, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, who was lead in developing the EIS.
Okay. Yeah, so there's nothing that specifies really how many alternatives we have to have. And so when we began this effort, of course, a careful reading of the court ruling to determine what the specific areas were that we needed to go back in and look at, and so those were the population objective and the genetic needs of the population, and then again making sure that the take that we allow, the management provisions that we allow, protect that genetic diversity that we're trying to improve. And overall, kind of overarching all of that, the judge said that the rule needs to serve the long-term conservation and recovery. And she read the 2015 rule as being more short-term. So when we were trying to determine the alternatives for the EIS, of course, we looked at those specific areas, the proposed population, or sorry, the population objective and the genetic objective, and then the take provisions, and then that larger overarching issue of conservation and recovery. As Brady said, we had kind of this odd path to get here, but we are able to look at our 2017 recovery plan to guide us for our long-term strategy. And so we have thought that it's sufficient to move forward with alternatives that look at, again, these specific features of the population, the genetics, the take provisions, and the essentiality determination.
Thanks, Tracy. Our next question is, why is the proposed criterion for measuring genetic recovery the number of released wolves surviving rather than actual genetic contributions? Releasing 22 captive cross-fostered pups is a metric that does not directly relate to genetic health. Pedigree analysis using measures like relatedness and founder genome equivalence have traditionally been suggested to estimate the impact of new releases in Mexican wolves. And so I'm going to turn that over probably to Tracy, who was the main developer of our recovery plan as well. So Tracy?
Yeah, so there are multiple ways to write recovery criteria. There are multiple combinations of population sizes and genetic measures, that could be adequate for recovery. And so again, our effort when we wrote the recovery plan to develop the recovery criteria, again, was founded with this population viability modeling. And we did discuss a number of different ways and measures to articulate in the criteria. And we decided that just kind of simply sticking to the structure of the modeling effort made a lot of sense. And so the idea there is that when we release wolves, we know that not all of them are going to survive. And we know that of the ones that survive, not all of those are going to breed. but that if we get enough wolves out into the wild, a sufficient proportion will survive and will breed for the genetics to kind of turn in the direction that we need. But we also determined that we wanted to make sure that the genetics in the wild population represent 90% of the gene diversity in the captive population. And again, 22 released wolves surviving to breeding age can accomplish this. And so there are other metrics that we measure and pay attention to, such as inbreeding, gene diversity, and things like that. And we will continue to track those on probably an annual basis as well. As the population grows, our sampling methodology and everything to track some of those metrics may change. So that is definitely kind of a work in progress behind the scenes for us to make sure that indeed the gene diversity of the population is improving the way that we want it to. I'm trying to get back to the question here. I think I hit everything on there, but maybe just to check in on me, Maggie, was there anything to add there? No, okay.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Our next question is, given the collapse of the red wolf population, which numbered over 100 in the wild, as well as the collapse of the Isle Royale wolf population, and the fact that Mexican gray wolves are currently as related as siblings and have no connectivity to other populations, how do you expect them to remain viable without increasing their range and opportunity to disperse? Just because 22 wolves reach breeding age over a span of years does not mean they will be able to, or that their pups will survive. So I think a lot of that, the answer to that question and the information that it can be found in our recovery plan. Our recovery plan calls for a population here in the US as well as a population in Mexico. We looked at the size, the numbers, the genetics, and all of that is within the recovery plan. But is there something more there that y'all would like to add, Maggie or Tracy, to support answering that question? John, how about you, John?
Yeah, I would just say that be careful to conflate different populations. So in the case of the Isle Royale population, it never got higher than approximately 60 wolves, maybe a little bit higher than that, but very confined to an island. So not that many breeding pairs. So that's the Isle Royale issue, and eventually it got really inbred. Few founders as well. So there are some similarities there. In the case of red wolves, the Fish and Wildlife Service quit managing those wolves, and there was hybridization that was occurring. So neither of those two cases are exactly relate exactly to the Mexican wolf case. So Mexican wolves, there's a far broader area that we developed from 2015 for wolves to be in, and then also Mexico, as Brady described. And then we're adding genetics from the captive population as well. So they aren't necessarily synonyms to look at those case examples.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the supporting answer on that. Next question is, how many wolves have been killed or removed for livestock depredation since the beginning of the Mexican wolf recovery program? And how does this compare to the number of animals removed in the Northern Rockies prior to delisting? So for that, I'll turn it back over to John to provide answer on that. And you're on mute, John.
Yeah, I was just rereading that question there. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but on the website, there is a Fish and Wildlife Service website. There is a table that describes how many wolves have been lethally removed or removed for livestock depredation purposes from 1998 to present. So that's in there. I gotta keep reading the question here. Whoops. That's where I'd look for that information, Brady. Can you add more?
second part of that question was, how does it compare to the number of animals removed in the Northern Rockies prior to delisting?
So the Northern Rockies was far greater numbers of removals. Northern Rockies grew faster, had some larger populations, and more lethal removals in the Northern Rockies. So the absolute numbers were far greater in the Northern Rockies than in the Mexican wolf population. The highest number of removals were in a time on Mexican wolves were in a time period between 2005 and 2009, which was SOP 13. And some of those removals may have limited our population growth, but since that time, we kind of stepped back from removing as aggressively, and the population has grown really well since that time. And so we're really concerned with how the population is growing, as well as mitigating depredations through a variety of tools. So what we started doing following SOP 13 being gone is using more non-lethal tools to try to solve the problems and working rather than removals to solve the problem. So the vast majority of our removals were in that window.
Brady, we have time for one more.
Okay. All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Phil. One more question before we take a break. The next question is, Interstate 40 was shown as the northern border of the designated Mexican wolf range. What happens in terms of policy and protection if one or more wolves move north of the interstate? And I will attempt to answer that question. So if a wolf moves north of I-40, it receives the full protections of the Endangered Species Act. So our 10J designation, whenever we write a 10J or designate a 10J, we have to draw a line on a map of where that 10J occurs. And right now that line is at I-40, east and west to the Arizona, New Mexico state borders, and then down south to the Mexico border. And so if a wolf moves north of I-40, it is fully endangered under the Endangered Species Act. The protections are much greater and stricter. I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons we designate a 10J population is so we lessen those restrictions, those prohibitions of the act, so that we can have more management flexibility, especially when we're trying to recover a large predator that does eat livestock. We need more tools to be able to manage those. And so our recovery plan focuses recovery south of I-40. We have more tools in place and less restrictions in place to manage those south of I-40. So if a wolf does move north of I-40 and becomes wholly established north of I-40, our intent is to move them back down south of I-40 so that they can interact with the other wolves and we can have more management flexibility. Our main concern is that if a wolf moves north of I-40 and starts eating livestock, then we have less tools in the toolbox to be able to manage that situation. And the livestock owner and permittees and landowners have less tools in place to be able to manage that situation as well. So with that, I think our time's up, and I'll turn it back over to Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Brady. Thanks, Tracy, Maggie, John, for the good answers. I know we have some more questions queued up. Rick, do we have a mechanism for responding in writing, like during break or into the hearing?
We do. Any of the panelists have access to the Q&A window and can continue to respond to them in writing, if that's the approach we want to take. Okay, I see nodding heads, so we will continue to answer questions as into break and into the hearing as we're able to. But we want to make sure we have time to accept all the formal comments we have tonight. We want to keep the full 2 hours for that, and we want to get a break in. I know I need a bio break. I suspect our other panelists do. You probably all do. So we're going to take, which is now a 12-minute break, come back at the top of the hour, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to leave the Zoom meeting room open during this break. So please feel free to stay connected. In fact, I recommend that.
While we're on break, we're going to project the names of the first 5 people who registered in order to make a comment. That's up on the screen now. I'm going to mention them here in a second. So if you're on the phone, you can hear and you will be able to prepare for when you're teed up to make your comment, so you're ready. So with that, our first 5 speakers after break will be Polly Walker, Elizabeth Bohannon, Rachel Rekatsky, I apologize if I mispronounced your name, Christopher Smith, and Victoria Okula. So with that, let's take a break, come back at the top of the hour, and we'll take your formal comments. Thank you very much. Okay, it is the stroke of 7 o'clock in the mountain region of the country. So on behalf of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I'd like to welcome you all back to tonight's public comment hearing. Again, my name's Phil Sang, president of DJ Case & Associates, a contractor here to help the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service coordinate and moderate tonight's meeting. And Rick Clausen is helping me in that regard in the background. Thank you, Rick. Reminder, there are several ways you can comment. First, you can submit comments online at the regulations.gov comment portal. And second, you can mail your written comments to the service, as Tracy indicated earlier. I'm not going to restate those addresses now since Tracy mentioned them earlier, but I'll leave them on the screen for a few moments for those of you online and remind everyone that they are listed on the website. Finally, the third way you can comment, and the main reason we're here tonight, is by delivering your comments verbally through this Zoom portal or over the phone. We're recording this session to capture and transcribe those comments, and I'll cover the process that will follow shortly. But please note that all comments are treated equally. It doesn't matter which way you choose to submit your comment. They will all be read by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They will all be treated the same, and they will all become part of the public record. So if you can't say everything you want to say in 3 minutes tonight, you can always submit however much you like through either of those other 2 methods. So now let's cover the instructions for our hearing. In order to keep the process fair and allow everyone a chance to comment equally at each of the public hearings, we'll give each person 3 minutes to speak. Everyone will be muted until called on, and if you registered for this virtual event, you had the chance to indicate if you wanted to speak this evening. We have listed those individuals by name in the order you registered. We'll read those names and display them on the screen in groups of 10 or so you know when your turn is coming. When it is your turn, we'll call your name. If you're online, you will receive a notification on your screen that you are being asked to unmute. You must click to accept that invitation to be able to speak, but as soon as you click to accept that, your mic will be open and you can offer your comment. If you're joining us by phone, we will call your name and authorize you to unmute. You will then need to press *6 to unmute, and then you'll be ready to go. If we cannot identify you from the phone number you are calling in on, we may need to ask you to raise your hand by phone by pressing *9 on your phone keypad. So *9 is to raise your hand, *6 would be to unmute once you get authorized to do so. I know it's a lot of details, and this would be a heck of a lot easier if we were all in a big room together like we used to, but we'll repeat the directions as needed as we go, and I'm confident we'll figure it out. Regardless of how you are joining us, when you are unmuted and ready to speak, please state and spell your name for the record, and tell us if you're representing an organization, and then give your comments. There will be an on-screen timer for your 3 minutes, so you know how much time you have left. if you're on the computer. And if you're on the phone, you'll have to manage your own time, but I will break in when you have about 30 seconds left so you can wrap up. When you're finished or your 3 minutes are up, we'll mute your microphone again so we can move on to the next person. We'll continue this process until everyone we have registered to speak has had that opportunity, or until our 2-hour comment period is up. And so when your turn to speak comes up, if someone else has already covered your comment, you can pass if you no longer need to say it, and we'll move to the next name on the list. Again, as I mentioned earlier, please don't use profanity or inappropriate language. We welcome passion in comments, but we need to keep the recording and the transcript G-rated, so we reserve the right to mute your microphone if needed. If there's time remaining, excuse me, if there's time remaining in our 2-hour hearing after all the registered participants have provided their comments, we can then reach out to others who did not register but who might have comments to offer. So stay tuned for instructions then if we have time. And in order to keep the process fair for everyone, we need to hold firm to that 3-minute rule. Again, there's going to be an on-screen timer if you're online. I'll break in if you're on the phone at 30 seconds. And we may need to turn off your mic when your time is up. It's nothing personal. We just want to hear from as many people as possible. The comment period will run until everyone has had a chance to speak, or until 9 p.m. Mountain Time, whichever comes first. And remember, you can always submit your comments by mail or through the regulations.gov online portal. And also there is another hearing on January 11th. So you have a time to come back if you choose to do that. So with that, Rick will pull up our list of the first 10 speakers, and I'm going to read this list of 10. So if you're on the phone, you know when your time is coming. Polly Walker, Elizabeth Bohannon, Rachel Rakachki, Christopher Smith, Victoria Okola, Rebecca Burkhalter, Jody Inman, Greta Anderson, David Parsons, and Robert Barber. And I think a few of those had dropped off over break. I'm not sure, Rick, you can help me with is Polly available?
Apologies, I saw Polly on earlier, but doesn't appear to be on at the moment.
All right, Elizabeth?
I don't see online either. We do have one phone participant, so if you happen to be one of these individuals, please use the *9 to raise your hand, just to make sure we don't miss you. But I don't see Elizabeth online at the moment either.
All right. Rachel Rakachki, apologize for my pronunciation.
Also don't see Rachel.
Okay, they're dropping like flies. Christopher Smith.
Christopher raised his hand. Thank you very much. I'm going to allow you to talk here.
Is he a phone participant?
No, online.
Okay. So
Can you
please
hear me?
remember to state and spell your name for the record.
Great, thanks. Christopher Smith, CHRISTOPHER SMITH, with Wild Earth Guardians. Miss Looters, Mr. McGee, Mr. Oakleaf, and Miss Melba Heiss. First, thanks for taking time out of your evenings. My name is Chris Smith. I'm coming to you from the Southern Rockies of northern New Mexico, where lobos used to roam and should roam again. On behalf of Wild Earth Guardians and our tens of thousands of members and supporters in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. Wild Earth Guardians was integral in creating this opportunity for Fish and Wildlife to improve the management rule we're considering. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of improvement, especially in key areas. I'll try to get through these quickly so that others have more time. The genetic objective is not a genetic objective at all. It is a measurement of effort and doesn't really have to do with genetics. You should use the genetic health of the population, which you monitor regularly, to determine when enough captive-born wolves and new genetic material has been successfully integrated into the wild population. Expanding the wolf recovery area should be part of this remand by my reading of Judge Zips's order, and I think that ignoring the MWIPA is a miss, or at best narrow interpretation of the order. Locking wild lobos into a small portion of their historic range when there is ample suitable habitat elsewhere, especially north of Interstate 40, is antagonistic to real science-backed recovery. An interstate is not an ecological or science-based boundary. It is a political one, and you're an agency that should be making decisions according to science, not politics. The non-essential designation is nonsensical. And even if the reasons given for this designation are taken seriously, it's still a bad decision. Replacing the wild population of Mexican wolves with wolves currently in captivity is a logistical and fiscal nightmare. So I think you should just designate the only wild population of Mexican wolves as essential to the survival of the species in the wild. I have more to say, which I'll submit in written comments. I genuinely appreciate the work that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff does. I know you work hard and in difficult situations, but I hold you to the standard that I think these wolves deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment and for managing the time. Victoria Okula.
Good evening. My name is Victoria Okula, Victoria and I'm with the Arizona Farm Bureau. I appreciate the opportunity to comment and express our opposition to the proposed updates to the Mexican gray wolf 10J rule. The Arizona Farm Bureau is a grassroots organization made up of 2,300 farmers and ranchers from across Arizona. Arizona's ranchers have been severely impacted by the Mexican gray wolf since the species was introduced in the wild in 1998. When the program began, there were 11 wolves in the wild, and the population has since grown to 186 wolves in the wild. Over the past several years, we've continued to see double-digit % increases in the number of wolves in the wild. This should be a sign that the program has successfully reintroduced the species, not a sign that more needs to be done while imposing additional burdens on the livestock owners. While the non-essential experimental designation allows for great flexibility with the management plan, and we appreciate that, it still sets strict guidelines that impact the ability for ranchers raising livestock to make a living in the Blue Range wolf recovery area. Currently, you cannot kill or injure a wolf because it is on or near your private property if your ranch is on public lands. Kill or injure a wolf that is in the act of killing, wounding, or biting livestock without a permit on public land, or kill or injure a wolf that is feeding on a livestock carcass. This means that ranchers who witness a wolf in the act of killing their livestock have no opportunity to prevent those direct economic losses. Therefore, we're opposed to restricting additional forms of take, which are currently allowed and were implemented to promote coexistence between predators and livestock owners. This goes against the intent of the experimental designation to allow for flexibility for the individuals impacted by the reintroduction of this species. Increasing the population objective will impose higher economic burdens on producers in this region. Many believe that direct losses are all that we need to compensate for. However, they fail to consider that indirect losses associated with wolf presence, such as the additional costs that are imposed on ranchers for undetected depredations, reduction of livestock weight, decreased birth rates, and increased management costs, such as relocating livestock or hiring additional employees to monitor the livestock. Prior to the introduction of the Mexican gray wolf, producers were already dealing with mountain lions, bears, coyotes, broken gates, high cattle prices, and drought. Imposing new provisions that limit their ability to raise livestock on public lands where the wolves are present, while setting goals to increase population, is not necessary when the populations of these predators already continues to increase. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today on behalf of ranchers in Arizona and incorporate this feedback in the rulemaking process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment and for the time. Rebecca Burkhalter. We see Rebecca on the list. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. All right. So my name is Rebecca Burkhalter, Rebecca Burkhalter. I'm currently employed at a sanctuary that we do have 2 Mexican wolves, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here as an individual. The idea that these animals in the wild are non-essential is absurd. At the least absurd, at the most it is malicious malarkey. The argument is that we could hypothetically replace these wild individuals with captive individuals. Perhaps that would be true if this were a more simple situation, but everyone here knows that there is more than but everyone knows that there is more at play here than the concern for wildlife. Even now, we are attempting to supplement this wild population with captive genetics with limited success. This model is not working because there seems to be merely a guise of conservation. Now, I know that US Fish and Wildlife are not the bad guys here. There are no bad guys. But we have been allowing politics to cloud science for far too long. In practice, we would lose invaluable genetics and inherently valuable animals. Additionally, many zoos, not us, I'm very thankful we don't have a breeding pair, are at capacity or overcapacity with their Mexican wolves. You are putting those handlers and animals at risk. Give me one moment. We could be doing more than just fostering. We need bonded packs to be released as well. We could be doing more to protect them. Instead, we SSS. We could allow for more than one population, but instead we place unrealistic limits on their connectivity. We could be listening to science, but instead we are still listening to politics. US Fish and Wildlife, I am begging you to listen to science. I am begging you not to follow in the footsteps of the carnage in Idaho and Montana. I am begging you to do your job and protect our wildlife. The time to end the war on wolves was 100 years ago. Why are we still waging it? Science and truth will prevail, but how much will we pay before you listen? I have more time, so I'm going to ask a few more questions. I really want to know, how will we prevent poaching in the future of these wolves? Just logistically, how? How will we educate the public? I truly believe that this hatred for wolves is an education issue. What is US Fish and Wildlife doing to convince people that these wolves are needed? How are we getting non-lethal management technique materials to these ranchers? Are we giving them for free? Because some of these materials are extremely expensive. We need to take care of our ranchers and make it very easy for them to make this transition of living in harmony with these wolves instead of using them as a target to make money. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk. I really appreciate the information I've gotten here today. It really has rounded this all out for me. So again, thank you so much and have a great night.
Thank you very much for your comment. Jody Inman. Jody Inman.
1 second, Phil. And just need to switch slides here real quick. Cue up our next batch so folks know what's coming up next.
Yeah, while we're waiting for Jody, I'll just read for the folks on the phone in case any of these folks are on the phone. The next list after Jody is Greta Anderson, David Parsons, Robert Barber, Emily Wren, Michael Robinson, Sarah Wilbur, Peter and Jean Osorio, Nanda Currant. Do we have Jody?
I don't see Jody online at the moment, unless there's one of our phone participants happens to be Jody. If you could press *9 to raise your hand. But if you aren't Jody, I don't see Jody online at the moment.
All right, let's move on to Greta Anderson.
See Greta?
Hello, thank you. My name is Greta Anderson, Greta Anderson. I'm the Deputy Director of Western Watersheds Project, and I'm based in Tucson, Arizona. Thank you all for your presence here tonight, and I do hope that we're listening, that everybody's listening, because many of us on this call have been here before. We were in the 10J planning process in 2014, and we asked for many of the same things, the things that weren't provided and that the court remanded to Fish and Wildlife Service to do this time around. And unfortunately, I think you've missed the mark. I appreciate that there have been some positive changes, but Fish and Wildlife Service keeps narrowly defining the bounds of the rulemaking by asserting that only portions of the 10J rule were remanded. But Judge Zips found that you were deficient in providing for the population size, quote, population size and genetic needs for the long-term conservation and recovery, close quote, of the Mexican wolves. Well, providing for population size and genetic needs for the long term includes addressing expanded geography and in accordance with the best available science and the long-term health of the species through near-term management. These wolves need changes on the ground now. I wanted to note that the current rule says that writes in the state's objections to recovery by saying at least 22 wolves that survive to breeding age will meet the genetic criteria. But survives to breeding age suggests that you're only planning to reintroduce wolves or introduce wolves through the cross fostering program. Tracy at one point earlier said that the rule still allows adult and family pack releases, but that feels a little disingenuous as long as Fish and Wildlife Service is still bound through the memorandum of agreement with the states, conceding to their demands that it's only puppies that are brought into the wild, and also disingenuous in context of the 10A1A rule that allows the states to intervene anytime there would be wolves breeding outside of the current MWIPA boundary or an established territory. And here's the thing, as Judge Zip said, the states don't actually call the shots on wolf recovery. The secretary does not need to get the approval of the states and the stakeholders. Because Judge Zips said that there are no other viable populations to cushion the subspecies from long-term harm, we encourage Fish and Wildlife Service to expand the rulemaking and incorporate geographic and genetic expansion of the wild population. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. David Parsons. There's David.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Sir.
David Parsons, D-A-V-I-D, P-A-R-S-O-N-S. I represent two groups tonight, one called Project Coyote and the other is the Rewilding Institute. And I was the service's first coordinator of the Mexican wolf, Mexican wolf recovery effort from 1990 to 1999. Rules are federal law. The proposed rule fails to address significant issues identified in the court order. Here I focus on just one, linkage of the rule to the 2017 recovery plan. The judge strongly advised against linking the rule to the plan with these exact words. Thus, even if the recovery plan retained all terms promised by the defendants here, there's no guarantee that those terms will protect against the harms that the court finds presented by the 10J rule, end quote. The proposed rule flaunts this admonition with multiple references intent to align the rule with the recovery plan. Recovery plans are discretionary, non-legally binding advisory documents. They can be changed on a whim, disregarded without legal consequences, ignored and erased from history when the states don't like them, and replaced with a version favored by the states. We have seen this happen. There's no requirement for tying a rule to a specific recovery plan. Delisting can occur when the criteria of the recovery plan in effect at the time are met. To ensure enduring relevancy and minimize vulnerability to future litigation, the rule must be flexible enough to remain valid through changing conditions and future revisions to recovery plans. The court has ordered a revision of the recovery plan due March 2022, and the 5-year review of the recovery plan is scheduled for November 2022. Both of these could result in changes to the recovery plan, which would render this new rule invalid or subject to further litigation. What a waste of time and effort that would be. The solution for an enduring rule is quite simple. Remove all mention of a population cap, remove all boundaries for wolf dispersal, include protective measures to ensure continued population growth and genetic health, change the ESA classification to experimental essential, because there's not enough credible science in the world to justify continuing the non-essential determination, and replace the smoke and mirrors language in the proposed rule with open transparency. Please do it right this time. It could be the last chance for survival of the Lobos. And I would add, I was stunned to learn from Tracy Melba-Hess tonight that the service did not use any science in determining to keep the non-essential classification. That's just unbelievable. Thank you for your time and this opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comment. Robert Barber is next. Robert.
This is Robert Barber. I will pass at this time.
All right, thank you, sir. Emily Wren.
Yes, I'm here. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
please.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Emily Wren, EMILYRENN, and I am a wildlife biologist, as well as the executive director of the Grand Canyon Wolf Recovery Project. The draft supplemental EIS does not adequately address the flaws raised in the court order in regards to the effective migration rate, metapopulation structure, and geographic range necessary for the long-term recovery of the Mexican gray wolf. The court order mentions migration, or some variation of that word, 12 times in 44 pages. The draft supplemental EIS only mentions migration one time in 229 pages, and only 2 other times it is mentioned in public comments within the document. Likewise, migration is only mentioned one time in the advanced copy of the proposed rule. The draft supplemental EIS largely ignores the effective migration rate that the court order repeatedly stated was a misrepresentation of the science in the context of 3 core populations connected by dispersal. 3 points from the court order. The 2015 final EIS wrongly assumed that publications that analyzed effects on the 3 populations connected by dispersal assured the same outcomes for a single isolated population. Scientists have concluded that establishing a metapopulation is necessary to achieve the recovery of the species. And 3, similarly, although Fish and Wildlife Service acknowledges that territory north of I-40 will likely be required for future recovery and recognize the importance of natural dispersal and expanding the species range, it nevertheless imposed a hard limit on dispersal north of I-40. Any wolves that venture outside the MWIPA will be captured and returned. There is no way to remedy the 2015 final rule with the current 2021 10J revisions as presented to further the recovery of Mexican wolves based on the court order without addressing the issues of an interconnected metapopulation structure for Mexican wolves within suitable habitat found in the United States. Therefore, I request that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service revise the I-40 hardline boundary to not only allow for natural dispersal of Mexican wolves by revoking the revised section 10A1A research and recovery permit that authorizes removals of wolves outside the MWIPA, but also allow for an active reintroduction and initial releases of Mexican wolves from captivity into suitable habitat of the Grand Canyon region located north of I-40. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Give Rick just a second to change the slides so we can bring up the next 5 after Nanda Current. Michael Robinson's next, but I want to give everybody who's coming a chance if they're on the phone. So after Nanda would be Stephanie Kalin, Seth Mangini, Florence Sandock, Justin Adcock, and Douglas Grinnell. So with that, Michael Robinson, you're up.
Hi, my name is Michael Robinson, MICHAELROBINSON. I represent Center for Biological Diversity. We are a nonprofit conservation organization, and we were one of the plaintiffs in the successful lawsuit challenging the 2015 rule necessitating this revision. We also were the plaintiff in a lawsuit in 2012 necessitating the challenge of the 1998 rule, and we were the lead plaintiff under the Name Wolf Action Group in the 1990 litigation that led to the 1998 reintroduction. So I really do hope that you pay more attention to our comments this round than you have in the past. And of course, we'll also be submitting detailed written comments. I'm going to touch on 8 changes that we need to be, or 1 good thing and 7 changes that we believe need to be made. The good thing is the elimination of the population cap. There was no biological justification for it. It was entirely political on behalf of the livestock industry controlled Arizona Game and Fish Department. And it's not a moment too soon to eliminate that hard cap on the number of wolves that would be allowed in the wild. It's good that you are suspending the rule that would allow take of wolves for killing their natural prey of deer and elk. Nevertheless, that should be a permanent removal of that take authority on behalf of the states rather than a temporary removal of it. The other provisions to protect genetic diversity are sadly insufficient to either protect genetic diversity or to enhance it as is needed. This population should be designated as essential. Loss of this population would make it highly likely that the Mexican wolf would go extinct in the wild, which is the essence of the criteria of what makes an essential species. The commitment by the Fish and Wildlife Service to remove wolves that leave the experimental population area, including, for example, the wolf Anubis, who is living currently near Flagstaff, north of I-40, is again counter to the biology that specifies that there will have to be a population or 2 populations north of I-40 for real eventual recovery, rather than the faux recovery that the Fish and Wildlife Service is painting a picture of, but that actually will not result in delisting. Family packs should be released to the wild. The success of family packs releases through 2006 was very high, in contrast to the very sad 20% of wolves that were taken from their parents in captivity and released with unrelated wolves in the wild that are known to still be alive. 20%, just 10 out of 50 between 2016 and 2021. Livestock owners should be required to remove carrion before they attract wolves and precipitate conflicts. That was required in the 1994 rule to reintroduce wolves into Yellowstone National Park and Central Idaho. It should be required now. And the livestock industry should not be given telemetry receivers and GPS codes to allow them to locate wolves in real time, as the service is currently doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good use of time. Sarah Wilbur.
I don't currently see Sarah online unless either of our phone participants happen to be Sarah. Again, if you happen to be Sarah, if you could press *9. Otherwise, I don't currently see her in our list of active participants.
Peter and Jean Osorio. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
My name is Peter Osorio, Peterossossorio. I live in the Muipa, and these comments are my own, not the official position of any organization. This year, we lost a warrior for wildlife who was cautiously optimistic that better angels would prevail and save us, all creatures, from extinction. I am unable to muster an equivalent. But honoring Crumbo, I'm not going to try and sandbag or blindside you. So here are the most likely reasons that you will litigate and lose. First, because the new rule must be based on the best available science, and because the new rule is also clearly tied to the recovery plan, the service is unnecessarily making the rule vulnerable unless the court first finds the recovery plan is based on the best available science. Second, instead of effective migrants, that is wolves from outside who both mate with and produce offspring with a member of the wild population, instead of effective migrants, the proposed genetic objective is based on 22 wolves who live to breeding age. Even if achieved, this would not necessarily result in genetic recovery for the wild population. For example, under the proposed rule, you could release 22 wolves who live to breeding age, but for whatever reason produce few pups. And yet, I'm afraid there are people in the service who would claim genetic recovery and declare mission accomplished, let's delist. Please think hard about whether the court will be as deferential to this proposed rule as it must be to the recovery plan, since the two are tied together. What may fly with the court in a plan, which you can change at will, apparently without being held accountable for results, probably will not pass muster in this rule. That's it. That's why I think the new rule must commit to a genetic objective of an adequate number of effective migrants. You pick it, you figure it out, that's your job. How many effective migrants are needed? And that your genetic objective incorporates over 4 years, new empirical results since this very flawed recovery plan. And please, please, don't get so wrapped up in ego or institutional commitment that you continue to slow walk the wolves. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Amanda Current or Current?
Okay, here we go. Hi, I don't belong to any organization.
Sorry, can you state and spell your name? I'm sorry.
It's NANDACURRANT, Nanda Current.
Thank you.
And I don't belong to any organization, but I've worked in New Mexico, Colorado, and California, mostly working with artists and conservationists and educational efforts for people to learn about wolves and apex species and river health. And I was involved with the Gila River Festival when it first started about a dozen years ago. So my big concern is, that I see Anubis needs to be where he is for the future. And because of my involvement with children and families, I listened to their hearts and their feelings about what they want. And if they were to write the rules, they probably would be opening the doors more than closing them and creating caps and even the language that we use, that we're harvesting something or removing something when we're killing it. And it's not a harvest, it's a social animal that raises a family like the families that they're in. So they're very aware of the story and the depth of that story. And I feel like we do skirt around it sometimes with the numbers, with the lack of good information. They understand the science. And I think that we owe it to them to let Anubis thrive. And as Michael Robinson mentioned, have family packs in the wild. And I understand what the young farmer was saying about a burden that we face in life, but we're facing a huge burden on our environment because of the way that we have mistreated wildlife, wolves, land, in holdings, the use of public lands and private lands. And the story has to change for us to have a future, to not have a pandemical future, to deal with climate change. It's a big picture that the wolves are a part of. And I think that we can do something worthwhile for that future rather than just a repeat performance that doesn't seem to be getting us out of that loop of relying on old solutions and ways that create more harm than positive growth in the world and with these families and children that I've seen for years. And I want to see that their wishes are met for the lives that they're going to live. And thank you for all your work. And I appreciate this time.
Thank you for your comments. Let's see, we don't see Stephanie on the list. If you're on the phone, Stephanie, can you hit *9? I'm not seeing that. So Seth Mangini. I believe Seth is on. There we go.
Hello. I actually would like to submit my comments in writing. So thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Florence Sandock.
I don't see Florence. I'm not sure that Justin is on either.
And that takes us to Douglas Grunow.
No Douglas. Again, if anybody of our phone participants or any of these individuals, please hit *9 to raise your hand.
Gloria Basden.
Nope.
Eric Albaida.
Also don't see.
Christina Otero.
No, sir.
Allison Gitlin. We have a taker. Very good.
Good evening. My name is Allison Gitlin, ALICYNGITLIN, and I am with Sierra Club's Grand Canyon chapter. Our wish is for a self-sustaining, wild, and resilient Mexican wolf population. The Endangered Species Act lays out a policy by which all federal departments and agencies shall seek to conserve endangered species and threatened species. And conserve in the law is defined as the use of all methods and procedures which are necessary to bring any endangered species or threatened species to the point at which the measures provided pursuant to this act are no longer necessary. That is, measures like live trapping and transplantation should no longer be necessary if the proper methods and procedures are employed under the act. Instead, this proposed rule seems intent on perpetually relying on these measures rather than aiming to actually help Mexican wolves rebound. Wolves will remain condemned to intensive management. The proposed rule says, quote, if Mexican wolves travel outside the MWEPA, we intend to capture and return them to the MWEPA or place them in captivity. According to this wording, if wolves follow their natural dispersal patterns we've observed repeatedly over the last several years, they could be captured with no obligation to return them to the wild. It makes no sense to put an arbitrary boundary like I-40 on where an endangered species is allowed to recolonize. Basic conservation biology dictates that multiple populations capable of interbreeding are necessary for resilience and for building genetic diversity. The proposed rule plans for one populations in the bounds of the area and one in Mexico, with acknowledgement that dispersal between the two areas would be infrequent, associated with high risk of mortality, low habitat quality between the locations, and an impermeable border wall. The Fish and Wildlife Service discusses low expected connectivity across the border. Yet on the north side, you have wolves actively dispersing toward the Grand Canyon region, hunting elk and not causing conflicts. Yet wildlife agencies intend to capture and return them to the MWEPA or place them in captivity rather than allowing them to establish a viable second population. Grand Canyon National Park recognizes wolves as an extirpated species, and in 2015, the park saw its first wolf return after 70 years of silence, following their active eradication during the last century. Grand Canyon represents a large and protected habitat, one with ample sources of wolf prey that won't cause any economic conflicts. Please reconsider the logic of what you're proposing, and please fix this rule to actually aim for a self-sustaining Mexican wolf population. Recovery of this species must be the goal, not perpetual management. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you for your comments. And before we go to Michael, we're going to switch slides here. Rick, why don't you just advance 2 so we get the full next 10. And I'm going to read those. So after Michael, we will have Judith Williams, Sandra and Glenn Griffin, John Spar, David Tynan, Betsy Klein, Karen Mahuna, David Quick, Donna Holmes, Laura Schneeberger, and Lawrence Stevens. So with that, Michael, you are up.
Hello, my name's Michael Sills Trausch. That's spelled MICHAELS-TRAUSCH. I am a supporter of the Grand Canyon Wolf Recovery Project, the Sierra Club, and I'm a resident of Phoenix, Arizona. I'm in favor of the 10J revision to support the Mexican wolf population. However, more should be done to ensure the inevitable wolf dispersal north of Interstate 40, and that population would then receive the protection and support to ensure genetic diversity of the population. Mexican wolves in particular are supposed to be part of the Southwest's natural landscape. Livestock owners represent a non-natural exotic species on the landscape using public lands, my lands, at a very low cost per head, but a high cost to the ecosystem. I am still waiting to be in a camp in Arizona and hear a wolf howl. I see free-range cattle all the time. Wolves and the nature they represent deserve our support. I support following science as the Fish and Wildlife Service continue with the very challenging task of restoring this critical indicator species to our natural landscape in a genetically healthy and sustainable manner. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Judith Williams.
I don't see Judith.
Sandra and Glenn Griffin.
Glenn Griffin here. We will submit our comments in writing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John Spar.
I don't see any John.
David Tynan.
No David Tynan.
Betsy Klein.
Oh, sorry, David Tynan.
Oh.
Popped up there. Sorry.
Sorry,
Missed you there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Tynan, DAVID-TYNAN. I'm largely calling on behalf of myself. I'm a resident of Valencia County, New Mexico. I'm also a member of New Mexico Wild, Sierra Club, and New Mexico Trout. I had a prepared statement, but in listening to several of the comments, I had to grab a book off my shelf, The Western Paradox by Bernard DeVoto. And I quote from his book: "The mountain men were brave, but they were careless. And those who followed the mountain men, the stockmen and the timbermen, the ranchers and mine owners and railroad men and bankers, were pillagers, trading in nature's great patrimony for fast bucks. The consequence, overgrazing and deforestation, would weaken the defenses of the land afforded by grass and trees and speed the process of erosion." Unquote. Of course, the Mexican gray wolf, I'm going to call the Lobo, because I am a Lobo from UNM. He deserves to be essential, enlisted as essential. Lobos, the scientific data suggests that Lobos have been in North America over 23,000 years ago. By the time the European conquistadors, explorers, and settlers came into North America, the Lobos had already spent many millennia creating the ecosystem that these individuals were here to exploit. Of course, they desire ancient and historical status. And that's the end of my statement. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for your comment. Betsy Klein.
Good evening. Betsy Klein, BETSY-KLEIN. I'm a resident of Sedona, Arizona, and I'm representing myself this evening. Thank you for this evening's hearing and the opportunity to speak. Like many have said, the proposed 10-day rule needs to be based on science, and we've heard from scientists worldwide that the recommended population for Mexican gray wolves is 750 to 1,000, and the recommended average for Arizona and New Mexico will not ensure the species' long-term survival. Given wolves' role within an ecosystem, they should be allowed to expand their population and manage themselves naturally. One viable way of allowing the populations to grow is to expand their habitat. Unfortunately, the proposed rule limits the wolves' ability to disperse to some of the best habitats and limits their connectivity to other populations between the US and Mexico. There is a highly suitable wolf habitat north of I-40, which should be used for recovery. There's no science-based reason for imposing a boundary on Mexican gray wolves who naturally want to return to their historic range. I also oppose the capture of Mexican gray wolves that travel outside the imposed recovery area. The time, effort, and money spent stopping what wolves want to do, what is inherent in them, makes no sense. I heard some of the claims made about Anumis to rationalize the first time he was captured, yet I could not find any validation to support those claims. It is so strange that we as humans are trying to impose a boundary on a wild animal who instinctively knows where to go. We all know the land of north of I-40 is suitable, yet the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service continues to draw a line in the sand, a line wolves have no idea even exists, and for what purpose. Too often we hear voices speaking out against the recovery of Mexican gray wolves, and the arguments used are not based on facts and science, but rather myths and fears. For example, I still hear today from a small faction of people how wolves grab kids from bus stops on their way to school. A group with conflicting interests in the recovery of Mexican gray wolves even created a video to promote that big lie, which even features a member from the Arizona Livestock Loss Board. With that said, it is clear that education is critical and it is imperative that all agencies involved conduct community outreach in educating people about endangered Mexican gray wolves and why they are essential. In addition, many coexist with wolves successfully, proving conflict avoidance techniques and management policies do work. And because they work, those techniques should be amplified and advocated. All of this is possible. We need the agencies involved to follow the science and support the intent of the recovery program, which means allowing Mexican gray wolf populations to grow, disperse, and manage themselves as they know how to do best. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Karen Mahuna.
Yeah, hello. My name's Corinne Mahuna. It's K-A-R-I-N, Mahuna, M-A-H-U-N-A. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. I just want to say that, you know, when wolves, Mexican gray wolves were first reintroduced, I was living in Holbrook, Arizona, and I was just so excited about their reintroduction. And I had so many expectations for it because I know that you guys could do this and you could do it well. And the United States is one of the richest countries in the world. And here we went ahead in the past and we totally decimated their population. We should be committed right now to restoring it. We've got the resources. We've got the people that know what to do. And I really would like to see you do that. And the Mexican gray wolf should be considered essential. There is no other wild population of Mexican gray wolves in the world. I mean, you can't expect Mexico, which has a population of 35 to 40, which really has not increased dramatically at all over the last 10, 20 years. And they don't have nearly the resources that we have. We should be able to be the ones that do this, and they should be considered essential. I'm living up in Colorado right now. We've just passed a resolution that we're going to be reintroducing wolves. And I have to ask you, why? Why is U.S. Fish and Wildlife not working together with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to reintroduce the Mexican gray wolf? It's always been talked about in the past about the three populations, and that Colorado, Southern Colorado, was one of those populations. In the past, there appeared to be some blockage that you were ceding to in terms of local government, state government, which shouldn't have happened, but that's opened up now. Colorado is going to be reintroducing wolves. Why don't we reintroduce the Mexican gray wolf into Southern Colorado and get about that connectivity going and be able to, get more reintroduce families out there and increase our genetic diversity and make a possibility for genetic connection into the future. I mean, this is the golden opportunity. The state is just opened up for this. What better time could there be to do this? And I feel like we're running out of time. I mean, the related right now, the Mexican gray wolves in the wild are all as related as brothers and sisters, as siblings. I mean, how that's not going to change quickly, but we could make a rather fast change by opening up more areas into the Great Grand Canyon area and into Colorado, which is now receptive and in the process of reintroducing gray wolves. So please, please work together with Colorado and let's expand the areas and the habitat of the Mexican gray wolves. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I'll give Rick a second to click to our last screen of registered speakers. I don't see David Quick or Donna Holmes on the list unless they're one of our call-ins. So David or Donna, if you're on the phone, please hit *9 so we can see you. Not seeing that, let's go to Laura Schneeberger.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Laura Schneeberger, LauraSchneeberger. I live on Raptor Spear Ranch in New Mexico in the wolf recovery area. And we have been a part of this program and living with this program since 1996 and have been through all of the recovery plans and everything there is to go through, including my most recent, which was spending the night in a tent in 25-degree weather last night to keep a pack of Mexican wolves out of our heifers. And I'm not getting any younger, and that's getting more difficult to do all the time. I don't show up at many meetings anymore because, well, COVID for one thing. So I really appreciate this Zoom. It takes a lot of the drama out of the situation, a lot of the travel, and a lot of the investment. I hear a lot of things going on and people talking about how this needs to be made into an essential listing. And I'd like to point out that there has never been a large predator that is made it into an essential listing. And the captive breeding population, if it does contain 98% of the gene pool of the genetics, why would that not be enough of a gene pool to create the essentiality that is required to put these animals out on the ground? It's ridiculous to say that they need to be made into essential a listing. It's just providing more of a reason to burden people further. And I want to tell you a little bit about that burden. We have invested, and we pay for all mitigation resources and measures. And we spend all of our time dealing with wolves now, all of it. If we don't, we lose our livelihood, all of it. We lose a 140-year-old ranch that has been in my family for 60 years that our grandparents are buried on. And I'm just appalled that most of the people out here do not have the kind of internet necessary to participate in this kind of meeting. So you need to worry about whether you're providing a robust enough public comment process and providing information for people that they need to see when they don't have the impacted public who are impacted by these animals, heavily impacted, do not have the opportunity or the internet to be able to participate in this kind of format. Although it has been a little bit of a benefit for me, but I have just recently upgraded some internet to be able to do that. And yet again, another investment. All we do is invest in this program now. And they say there's grants and opportunities and financial help, but it really isn't there. They say that they will give us a permit to kill a wolf that's caught in the act of killing your livestock, but I've never seen one given out, and yet it's used now as some sort of leverage to comply with a court ruling.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate that. Lawrence Stevens.
You bet, I'll write more.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Lawrence Stevens, LAWRENCESTEVENS. I work with Grand Canyon Wildlands Council, Wild Arizona, and several other organizations, and I'm a PhD. The first time I saw a wolf, I was 18 years old, alone in the woods of southern Canada. We looked at each other for a minute or two, and for me, that direct, curious, and calm interaction was absolutely life-changing. I'm now a PhD ecologist and have worked for the past 5 decades throughout Western North America on ecosystem ecology, endangered and water resources management, and also on environmental policy. Every landscape that I've worked in across Western North America that contained wolves has been ecologically intact, with healthier and geomorphically more functional streams, springs, grasslands, and forests. Wolves play an essential role in top-down trophic cascades. Where wolves are present, the landscape is much healthier. I'd like to make these recommendations. First, quit the idea of artificially imposing range limits on these wide-ranging predators. The I-40 northern range boundary is neither a credible decision to make in a policy, nor is it realistic, because these are wide-ranging species. Abandoning this inappropriate decision will help improve the ecological integrity not only of eastern Arizona, eastern central Arizona, and western central New Mexico, but also the Grand Canyon region and the lands in between and to the north. Secondly, remove the limit on the number of wolves in the wild. There is no justification really for trying to keep the population in check. They do a perfectly good job of checking themselves. Third, release packs, not individuals. Fourth, ensure fair treatment of the ranching community. It's essential that we have better communication and better support of the ranchers that are trying to live their lives in this landscape. Don't allow electronic tracking. That is a very false way to go about pretending the management of these things. Next, permanently remove the restrictions on ungulate depredation. Next, base the recovery plan on better available science. And this needs to be determined by unbiased experts, not by agency staff who have secret agendas. Lastly, make this an essential, not a non-essential population. This is a very difficult discussion. I really appreciate the Fish and Wildlife Services holding these discussions, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
And thank you for your time and your comments. Amanda Trueblood.
Hi, my name is Amanda Trueblood, Amanda, Trueblood, Trueblood. I am from Tucson, Arizona. I've lived here for about 20 years. I'm an individual. I'm not with any organization tonight. I'm just an animal lover. I've kind of been following the story of the Mexican gray wolf since I learned about it when I moved here. I'm very glad that, we're recovering these animals. And I learned a lot tonight from the presentation. I agree with a lot of the things on there, like, getting rid of the take exceptions that, have been there, and removing the upper limit of 325 wolves. That's far too small. There shouldn't be an upper limit. And people have already said many of these things. I just want to reiterate, I would also like to see this go further, removing I-40 as the northern boundary. That's not really, as other people have said, it's an arbitrary human imposed line. The animals don't understand this, whether you're talking about wolves or wild horses or any other animals. So I disagree with putting the upper boundary on it. And also I would like this population to be designated as essential. The lady who spoke did explain their reasoning that, you know, you have enough in captivity to reintroduce them if necessary, but this is the only wild population, and that would be incredibly difficult to do. Look at how long it's taken us to get this far. So I really think that they also need to be designated as essential. But I am happy with some of the things I heard with the take limits and such. And thank you for all you guys are doing, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comment. Carolyn Nelson.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. Okay, Carolyn Nelson, Carolyn, Nelson, Nelson. And I'm representing myself and my future, the future of my grandchildren when I speak tonight. I live here in Glenwood. We are ranchers, and some of you will automatically say, ooh, livestock people, they don't like nature, they overgraze, they're horrible. That is not true. And what I don't understand is Fish and Wildlife Service taking over our ranches by putting wolves on them. And right away, that's a conflict. But what people see, what they hear, and it's not, what they hear is that cattle overgraze and that the cattle are horrible for the environment. That's not true. Overgrazing was in the early 1900s. For the most part, that's not true. Overgrazing was in the early 1900s. And the Forest Service came in, and those who were already on the allotments or on the land on national forests gave those people who had preference, they gave them the numbers to run the cattle so that other people couldn't bring more cattle in and overgraze those areas. And so we get a bad reputation. And what does this have to do with wolves? You've noticed tonight, not many people who have called in, who are local here, who have wolves in their backyards have called because we don't trust you. Fish and Wildlife Service, we don't trust you. You don't work with the people who are here. Some other lady made fun of the kids who were in cages. I cannot speak for that family, but I know that family, and I know that those kids, there were kids who were followed home by wolves, and it's not advertised. Would you want your 10-year-old to be followed home by a wolf? Maybe it's just a pet. That's what everyone thinks. But Fish and Wildlife Service does not show the pictures of elk that have been eaten. They do not show the pictures of cows that have been killed, like groups of them, and just one or two or several bites taken out of them and left so they can go kill more. Fish and Wildlife Service does not show the horses that have been killed in people's corrals and in their backyards. I want my kids to be in nature and to live here, but when these wolves come in here, they remove our economy. I do not understand the killing that all you say is okay.
Wrap up. Okay, thank you. If you have more to say, please submit it in the written comments. Thank you. We had a last minute addition, Allison Dahlman, in the registration list. Allison, are you with us?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Allison Dahlman, Alllyson, D as in David, Allmann, representing myself. The greatest awe experience of my life was seeing wolves in the wild. Given the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services mission to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people, Mexican gray wolves should be fully listed as endangered, not experimental, non-essential. This weak designation allows other agencies to act against and kill them without consultation and on public land, our wildlife under the public trust doctrine, clearly not benefiting wildlife or the public. All species depend on genetic diversity to adapt to stress, disease, environmental conditions, natural and human-induced. Scientists and geneticists recommended a population of 750 to 1,000, not 300. Redundancy, resiliency, and representation are necessary for recovering a species and reducing their risk of extinction. The service utilized the 3 R's of recovery in the past, but failed to apply it to Mexican wolves. Scientific principles are necessary when evaluating species survivability, and this failing requires your immediate attention. Mexican wolves are still functionally extinct in the vast majority of places they used to live, which included areas north of I-40, a political human boundary, thus failing the criteria for adequate representation. Because there are so few and the service has not used measurable genetic standards to protect their genetic variability, more bonded wolf families must be released into the wild if they are to be resilient. Releases into the Grand Canyon ecoregion and Southern Rockies would improve resiliency and redundancy. As the climate crisis continues, Mexican wolves will need to move into the Grand Canyon. This movement of a keystone species will benefit the whole ecosystem, and they need to be allowed in fully protected. Knowing the vast majority of livestock death is due to starvation, dehydration, poisonous plants, birthing difficulties, choke, weather, theft, infectious diseases, including chronic wasting disease, which wolves help control in deer and elk populations because they seek weakened and ill prey, it's incumbent upon the service to educate the public that wolves are not the threat to livestock as they are so often wrongly accused. Non-lethal methods are successfully utilized in livestock areas, benefiting the livestock by reducing ungulate transmission of CWD and keeping other predators at bay. These methods are much cheaper and acceptable to the public as coexistence is becoming necessary to protect so many endangered species and recover areas where trophic cascades have broken down because wolves have been extirpated or greatly reduced in numbers. Most Americans want wolves protected, and wolves regulate their own populations. They do not need human supervision. And saying harvest is wrong. It's killing. Management is wrong. It's killing. We need to learn to speak accurately. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. That is the end of the registered folks we have registered to speak. We still have about 45 minutes left, so we have time for additional comments. If you haven't spoken yet and you'd like to, we'd like to give opportunity for folks on the phone. If you're on the phone and you'd like to make a comment, please hit *9 to raise your hand so we can acknowledge you. Do that at this time. Okay, I'm not seeing any takers there, so let's put it back open to all. If you're online and you'd like to make a comment, if you're on the phone, you can still change your mind, hit *9 at any time. If you're online, there is a raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you raise your hand, we will take as many comments as we can in the order we receive them. All the same parameters apply. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes and the timer will be on the screen. Looks like we have Angie McMillan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, my name is Angie McMillan. It's spelled ANGIE MCMILLAN. I am representing myself. I live in a small town in in Arizona called Cholo. I've lived here for over 27 years. I just wanted to say that I absolutely love what all of you are doing here, and I love that you are representing these animals that are desperately needed in our lands. Nature needs these endangered wolves, and we have to be the people that help them. And they are more valuable to our lands rather than beef. Is all I really wanted to say. Again, I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thank you for everything you have done, and I appreciate everyone that has their jobs towards these lovely creatures that help our lands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet who would like to, please raise your hand, either *9 on the phone or the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen if you're online. I'm just going to pause for a little bit longer. Don't want to rush. We've got some time. Esther Ceballos?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I was there in one meeting in
Can you please,
2013.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Can you please state and spell your name for us? For
Oh,
the record?
yes, I'm sorry.
Sure.
My name is Esther Ceballos. Esther, E-S-T-H-E-R. Ceballos, C as in Charles, E, B as in boy, A, double L-O-S.
Thank you.
I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I learned from this program about wolf in 2013. My granddaughter just born and we went to the meeting. I was carrying her. Since then, she learned about wolf and she's so excited that you guys doing really wonderful things for this animal. And she been asking that one day that she want to go and see it in the wild, but I can go and do a lot of things. But I told her that you guys doing wonderful and doing a really good job, and we need to see them, and they need to be there because they are good for the earth, for the environment. And so when she grow a little more, we could go and see them. And it is a while. And I don't know how many wolves there in the wild. And I hope so they doing wonderful. And I do thank you for the job you're doing. And I do appreciate you keep them alive. And my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great grandkid also say thank you for the wonderful job you're doing. And we hope next year we could go over there and see them or alive. I mean, on the wild. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet would like to make a comment for the record? Okay, we have Wendy Thuring.
Hi, my name is Wendy Thuring. It's W-E-N-D-Y. My last name is spelled T-H-U-R-I-N-G. I would like to know if you're going to be answering our written questions from the last sessions, or if we can ask those questions that you still haven't answered now.
This is not an answer session now, but I don't know, Brady, if you want to address, will those other written questions be taken, or what's the plan there?
There will be opportunities at the next information session for question and answer comment session then. The written questions at the last session will probably not be addressed within the 10J rule. We're looking more for seeking information for the rule, and the information that we're not using in the rule, we will provide a response within the 10J rule for. But the public is welcome to send us an email or give us a phone call outside of this session, and we will try to address questions at any time. Our phone numbers and our email addresses are on our Mexican Wolf website. And so I would suggest that people that have additional questions or would like additional information, please feel free to give me a phone call or send me an email or any one of my staff.
Wendy, do you have additional comments to make for the record?
Just that I hope that you take the time to answer all questions fairly and evenly and answer the questions that are specifically asked. I think that would be very helpful for the public to get straight answers and not, I don't want to say dumb it down, but very specific answers, just short and sweet. I think that would definitely help, and it would probably help eliminate some confusion if there is any out there. And I just hope that, this time you guys really put in a robust outreach solution to educate not just the ranchers, the livestock people and the farmers, but everybody as a whole. Education is going to be key, and it's going to be up to you guys to do that. It's got to be, it's got to be easily understood, and where you're going to reach the masses. And that, I think, is going to be the best way you can mitigate all problems for this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Anyone else would like to make a comment who hasn't already? Seeing none, I would like to just thank everyone so much for managing the time. I didn't have to really break in at all. That's really fantastic, and just speaks a lot to just your diligence in participating here. Please do, for those who had more to say, please do submit your written comments either through the regs.gov portal or the mail address that Tracy gave earlier, and that's on the website. Also, remember there is another question and answer session, just like we had today, and public hearing, just like we had tonight, on January 11th. So if you have more to say or want to hear it again, please join us again, January 11th. This session will be posted on the website, or the transcript of this session will be posted on the website within 3 working days. So take a look at that if you'd like to go back and re-listen to comments that were made, yours or others. And with that, I'm going to pitch it back to Brady McGee to wrap us up.
Actually, Phil, would you mind if we sat here for a few more minutes and see if anybody has anything further, as well as maybe give us an opportunity to continue on the Q&A portion, on the handwritten portion? Sure. We don't have to, I'm not sure that we have to stay on until 9, but maybe stay on a few more minutes.
Of course.
Or I'm getting some site information that we may need to stay on till 9 o'clock because it is a public information session. So I may look through some of my other peers on here to see if that is true or not.
Okay, well, that's just fine. We will stay here until 9 o'clock. And if you are thinking of something or something comes to you that you'd like to comment, please do. If you're on the phone, *9, or hit the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Otherwise, I think the service staff will just continue answering the questions.
Hi, everyone. This is Aslan Maestas from the Fish and Wildlife Service. I do want to make clear that we will be staying on until 9 p.m. Mountain Time. As we posted those times, we will be on throughout the end of the hour to take comments. We will not be taking more questions and answers. As Brady said, you can find information for contacting us on our website, but we will be here to accept formal comments for the record. So please follow the instructions on slide right now if you have a comment, but we'll be standing by to accept those.
Thanks, Aslan. Okay, looks like we have a couple more comments. Michael Robinson.
Hi, this is Michael Robinson with Center for Biological Diversity again. My name is still spelled Michaelrobinson. You had given an opportunity for people who were not registered to speak, and at this time, no one else has taken you up on that. And so I'm taking the opportunity, unless it's deemed inappropriate, to continue my comments, which I curtailed somewhat in order to keep to the previous 3-minute time limit. That said, continuing, I was speaking to the need to limit the distribution of radio telemetry receivers and GPS codes, both of which allow the real-time location of wolves and that threaten their safety. These codes should be only made available to government biologists who are working in the field and to scientists who are doing legitimate research into the Mexican wolves or the ecosystem. Presently, they are given out to livestock owners, and there's been a variety of policies and lack of policies in terms of supervision. Excuse me. At one point in the past, the Fish and Wildlife Service admitted that it had not kept a record of everyone who had received such receivers. Now it keeps records, and 2 individuals who have been convicted of crimes associated with the illegal killing of Mexican wolves were the recipients of such receivers and may well have used the receivers in the commission of their crimes. There's a huge number, over 100 Mexican wolves that have been illegally killed, and just a very small number, a handful or 2 handfuls or less, of people who have been held accountable in the justice system for illegally killing these endangered animals. For 2 of those to be people who have received telemetry receivers from the government should be a red flag that something is awry. And the total number of terrible deaths that have impacted the genetics and the demographics and the distribution of this endangered species should be a cause for saying that only people who have legitimate needs for this should be afforded this very powerful technology that enables individuals to strip their wolves of their ability to stay hidden. The supposed justification for this, as for so many of the unwise take provisions that allow for the killing or the destruction or removal of wolves, the justification for that is supposedly to enhance tolerance for the wolves. But in fact, studies that we will submit into the record along with our written comments from other areas, as well as from the Southwest, show that in fact, social tolerance for the wolves is not enhanced by enabling the killing of those wolves or the removals of those wolves or jeopardizing the safety of the wolves by allowing people who have avowed their hatred of the wolves, who have avowed to try and remove them all, who have sued the service to get rid of the wolves. That social tolerance is not enhanced by giving them the ability to locate the wolves in real time and severely jeopardizing the safety of those wolves. Thank you for listening to my additional comment.
Okay, thank you. And I've got another Greta Anderson. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. My name is Greta Anderson, Greta Anderson. I want to speak for a minute about livestock depredations because a lot of the provisions of the rule are designed to, as Michael stated, to increase social tolerance, but also to compensate permittees for somehow accommodating native wildlife species on our public lands, where they are getting a screaming deal at a very highly subsidized grazing fee. Notwithstanding this, I wanted to say that the livestock depredations, we've uncovered quite a bit of evidence that the depredation investigations are seriously flawed, and that livestock depredation events are being over-reported, over-confirmed, and the financial and social incentives for doing so have yet to be discovered or admitted to. Effectively, Wildlife Services is confirming wolf kills with very little scant evidence on the ground, which creates a problem because it actually undermines social tolerance in that it overstates the number of livestock that wolves are supposedly killing. It makes the public think that wolves are doing more damage to the ranchers than they actually are doing. It creates a perception that wolves are bloodthirsty killers. Meanwhile, the livestock on the public lands are displacing the native prey by a factor of 2 to 1 in compared to native elk species, by which I mean the forage consumption. Each cow eats the equivalent of 2 elk in animal unit month forage consumption. So if we're filling the landscape with prey that wolves are not supposed to eat and giving 50% of the vegetation on those lands to livestock, we're setting up a problem and then recompensating the ranchers for their supposed losses. I would like for the Fish and Wildlife Service to consider the facts of depredation, consider the facts of the depredation investigations, consider having independent reviewers and verification for that process and not having someone from the Department of Agriculture be the one to confirm livestock depredations. And I think that by telling the truth about the effect that wolves are having on the landscape and that livestock are having on the landscape, that's how we would truly build social tolerance for wolves. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that additional comment. We have Wendy Thuring.
Hi, thanks again. My name is still Wendy Thuring. It's still WendyThuring. I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, when somebody asked earlier, how many Mexican wolves have been killed in the, past specific time period? And I believe it was John that answered. He said he didn't know, and no one else on the panel bothered to answer that question. And granted, I know you're not going to have those numbers killed by poachers or by natural causes or accidental numbers, but I have no doubt that those numbers are indeed available to you, any of you at any time. And I think you probably could share those. I just think that for transparency reasons, I think your organization would probably do better if you actually shared actual tangible numbers. Take the data, get the data, bring it to these meetings in the future and be transparent about it. Because to me and maybe others, I feel as though maybe not that you're hiding something, but to me, it doesn't sound right as just a normal citizen that you don't have numbers. I don't believe that. And I think that they should be shared, right? The other thing I want to say too is, and I'm all for ranchers. I grew up on a big farm myself. I get it. I come from big livestock ranching community. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people when I was growing up that, joked about killing wolves for sport and moving their bodies to their property so they wouldn't get, busted for poaching or illegally killing a wolf, which it's sad, but it still happens to this day. So I'm really hoping that, while you're putting together this plan and figuring these things out, that you're spending just as much time to organize some sort of, mitigation to help stop, the poaching of these wolves and to help the ranchers, not feel like poaching them or killing them, being done by outreach and education and stuff. And I hope that you guys do take the time to investigate ranchers that make several or multiple claims. I've seen that happen in other states as well. And, there's a problem there. And I just hope that you guys take the time to actually really look into that and make sure that what's being claimed is actually happening. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the comment. Any others? So we still have about 28 minutes and we'll be standing by. If you've said your piece and you're good to go, feel free to call it a day or hang on in case someone else speaks and you want to hear that, that's all fine too. Okay, Michael, something else?
Yes, this is Michael Robinson with Center for Biological Diversity again. And my spelling of my name is Michaelrobinson. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to the decision makers who have been so closed off to our suggestions over years for how to improve this program. So I will, since no one else is jumping into the void, I will continue to opine and we'll follow up with facts again and very much specifics and citations in our written comments. I think it's important for the Fish and Wildlife Service to be clear to everybody involved in this or interested in this program, and especially its cooperators among the anti-wolf counties that have done so much to shape this pernicious rule, this largely pernicious rule that does so little to actually help the wolves. I think it's important to be clear that even though you keep referring back to the recovery plan and making this rule consistent with the recovery plan, that you've told the federal judge, Judge Zips, that the recovery plan doesn't have to be based on science. And your amici on or intervener defendant, New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, made that very specific argument. And we don't agree that a recovery plan does not have to be based on the best available science, but that's the argument that your side has made. And for you then to claim that this this specific rule is going to be fine because it relies on the recovery plan is leaving one very important thing unsaid. And that is, even if the courts hold that the recovery plan doesn't have to be based on the best available science, delisting of the Mexican wolf, getting it off of the endangered species list, does have to be based on the best available science. So insofar as the anti-wolf counties and special interests that helped shape this proposed rule believe that the end is in sight, believe me, the fact that the Fish and Wildlife Service is in the process of destroying the genetic diversity of the Mexican wolf does not mean you'll get away with it by delisting prematurely. No, when your own PVA shows that Mexican wolves are going to be declining to extinction after that 100-year timeline that you arbitrarily cut off analysis for, it's very clear that the courts will not allow delisting even as the genetic diversity deteriorates while the population numbers for some period of time continue to increase. It's a chimerical promise to your anti-wolf partners that delisting will happen as per the recovery plan, but that's not what the science shows is actually the plight of the Mexican wolf. It will require real genetic improvement, not this fake genetic improvement that this proposed rule suggests will happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that additional comment. And we have David Parsons. You're up.
Thank you very much. It's David Parsons again, DAVID PARSONS. And Michael kind of reminded me of an issue that's been of great concern to me for the longest time. In the presentation, it was shown that there were 60 cooperating partners involved. Those partners get inside access to the development of these plans and the environmental impact statement. And the language that defines who those partners can be is fairly broad. And I don't have the advantage of having it right in front of me, but it refers to government entities and interests who have, or stakeholders who have an interest in the land affected by the project. And that's always included the extractive users, but it's never included the non-extractive users and the conservation community. And I have commented time and time again that Americans or the public with an interest in the lands that are being affected is the public. They are public lands. we all own those lands. We all have an interest in what happens on those lands, and we're not given that special seat at the table. We have to take the scraps and submit our public comments, and they're hardly ever have any effect on the outcome of the rule. And I'm a 24-year veteran. I worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I ran that program. I was the first person to run it from 1990 to 99. We valued the conservation community back then as valuable partners in this process. Why is the Fish and Wildlife Service cutting out of the process the only interest group that actually supports its mission? Of those 60 groups, I can guarantee you there are probably no more than 2 that actually would say they support the full recovery of Mexican wolves. They're in the mix. They sign up as cooperators so that they can water down the process and minimize what the Fish and Wildlife Service does to recover the wolf. And this has irked me for years now. And I'm going to submit it again in my written comments. And I hope this time maybe it's listened to. Thank you for letting me rant on that issue. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you for saying more. And we have Greta Anderson.
Hi, this is Greta again, Greta Anderson. Hey, if you've got the time, I can talk this whole session.
Well, we're going to do it in 3-minute increments.
Okay, I'll do it. I just wanted to note that the time really is now for the Fish and Wildlife Service to secure the future of Mexican gray wolves. I have a lot of faith in the Fish and Wildlife Service's ability and capacity to do that now. And I hope that you'll take advantage of this opportunity. Your new boss, President Biden and his administration have promised to follow the science. And what we are asking you to do is follow the science, the best available science, the recommendations of the scientists who are telling you what you need to do to recover wolves. This scaled back plan that needs state buy-in is very last administration, very Trumpian. The idea that locals should have more control and counties should have more control is really the genesis of the anti-public lands and anti-wildlife movements in this country. And so I think to the extent that the Fish and Wildlife Service is giving into that by allowing the plans to be and the recovery of wolves to be circumscribed by Arizona and New Mexico, Utah and Colorado, you're basically playing into the hands that the locals have more say than we do. The reality is wolves need to be recovered for everybody. The habitats that they affect need to be recovered for everybody. And all other species of wildlife depend on the same ecosystem integrity that wolves can bring. I'm just, again, going to reiterate that I think that you can do it. I really want you to do it. I hope you will do it. And thanks for considering my comments.
Thank you for coming back around. And I think that's just in order to honor the process, we need to, you're welcome to speak again if there's no one else that wants to speak who hasn't already, but we need to do it in 3-minute increments so we can keep it fair for all participants. So let's see, Michael, you've spoken. Carolyn, let's go with Carolyn, who hasn't spoken twice yet. Carolyn Nelson.
Yeah, those who are stick with it till the end, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
It's very important to me what's going on. There have been a few things that I've heard that I don't necessarily, I do not agree with. One is public land. Public land are Bureau of Land Management lands that people moved off of. They weren't able to homestead in that area. National forests are not public lands. They have public access, but the U.S. Forest Service has already said does not own the water. So when you go to the Wild and Scenic Act, That is why Wild and Scenic Act takes the land around the waters, because they don't own the water. Forest Service doesn't own the water. There's already rights on those waters. So I'm not here to argue. I'm just telling you that there's already rights that the first to put to use is how New Mexico State Constitution says. And those rights need to be looked at. People say, we want to come out and look at the wolf. Okay, then let's get an acre. Let's put 10 elk in there and put a wolf in, and watch how the elk bunch up and are nervous, and how the elk actually die, how the wolf kills. Let them see that, because those of us who are in these counties that are anti-wolf, we see that. Many of us see that. And that is not represented. Like, I'm kind of amazed of hearing, I will say, the other side from the livestock producers saying that Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't listen to them, because the livestock are also saying, you guys don't listen to us. So, but it's just, people do not understand what wolves do. The pictures are not out there what wolves do. I had another thought and I kind of just went blank on it, but ranchers have rights out here. We want our families to get to continue to live out here. We don't want to be put out of business and have to move to town. I like how my kids are raised, that they are independent and they can work and they have good reputations. And we take care of the land. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Our water, elk during this drought have come to the livestock watering that my husband has cleaned out on thousands of acres. I'll quit in 4 seconds. On thousands of acres, there was no water except for livestock water.
Thank you. Michael, I know you raised your hand first, but Allison hasn't spoken twice. I'm going to ask you to stand by. Allison Dahlman, you're next.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the lady who was talking about having people see what wolves do. And I think it would be appropriate if people saw that she was raising livestock for slaughter and watch the slaughter process. As a veterinarian, I'm well aware of the slaughter process. And I think seeing what actually happens might just make people rethink their diets. As far as the wolves are concerned and hunting, they only kill the weak and the ill. They do not seek out the strong, the healthy, the ones that you want in your elk and deer herds to carry on this incredible gene pool, the healthiest. Those are killed by hunters who don't want the weak. They want the big quote unquote trophy. And so while I hear what the lady was saying, I think having the whole picture of the fact that all those cows are on our public land and paying pennies per acre while our wildlife are being killed, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service kills millions of all kinds of wildlife every year. And that's our tax dollars. That is offensive to me and most of the people that I know. And when we have these amazing non-lethal methods at our disposal that are becoming much more common, we know that they're efficacious, and there is resistance from certain communities because of these myths that are carried down through generations. That is an example of the ignorance that the Fish and Wildlife Service has an incredible opportunity to offer education, letting people know, hey, here are the facts. These are old myths. They're not true. And also informing the public that the vast majority of livestock death has absolutely nothing to do with actually any predator, not only just wolves, but any predator. The fact of the matter is that dogs kill 3 times more livestock than most other predators, dogs. So I hear your concern, and I think letting people watch what happens in a slaughterhouse is another alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. Rhonda Byrne hasn't spoken yet, so Michael, stand by.
Sorry, Allison, you just said every word I wanted to say. I'm an RN and I've worked in the inner city and I live in the foothills. And
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you and have you?
Oh yeah,
spell your
Rhonda
name?
Dern, RHONDADERN.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking as a citizen. And when I hear people say that children were chased home by wolves, I want to fact check that, but I have worked in the inner city where people bring their cows to the slaughterhouses and the environment around feedlots and slaughterhouses. Like you say, oh, you don't live with the wolves. Well, you don't live in the inner city where there is a lot of pollution for our children because you've taken your cattle there at a very young age. And cattle, I feel like sometimes I care more about your cattle than you do because cattle die of all sorts of horrendous diseases. And none of which, almost 99.9% of the time, are by a predator, and lowest on the list would be a wolf. And for Fish and Wildlife Services to allow these myths and non-truths to get perpetuated like they do in Colorado with the CPW Commission is just mind-boggling. Public lands belong to all of us. And like Allison was saying, livestock owners get to have public lands for $1.35 an acre. I think that if a cow is on our public lands, they are baiting wolves because that's their habitat, and nobody should ever do lethal management of wolves on our public lands. And when livestock owners in Colorado say, oh, this is going to be the nail in the coffin for our ranches, I want to say, give me a break. Many of them get I know a rancher that got a $6 million the land thing that you get for an easement, conservation easement, that they're not even using for conservation. So they're, I think that when you're saying that we all care about our public lands and that we have coddled the livestock industry long enough, and I would love to see the Fish and Wildlife Service stop when things that are not factual that are said, because it does just perpetuate it. And being able to kill our sentient beings, like Michael Robinson was saying, does not bring back tolerance. In fact, most of the social intolerance right now in America is of people being intolerant of those that want to slaughter the sentient being. And it's just mind-boggling that you are not allowing wolves to walk over the border of Interstate 40. And thank you for everything that everybody else has said. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Robert Wolf, he hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, thank you. Good evening to everybody. I'm Robert Wolf, ROBERT-WOLF, like the wolf, exactly. I'm speaking from Mexico. I'm a Mexican citizen and I work with the Mexican Wolf Program in Mexico. And I am really pleased and really, I want to give all my support for this 10J rule because it is really helpful for the Mexican wolf population in terms that it's something that the 10J rule from 2015 already changed. It enhanced the Mexican wolf experimental population area to the south, to the Mexican border. And there has been, although some people don't know that, but there has been some initial, well, not completed exchanges, but animals have been crossing the border. And that's a first important step to establish a genetical exchange between the Mexican and the US population. And that is very important. And that's something that this 10J rule from the 2015, and that is now, I think, enhanced. I do see it as a better version now, but that is important to keep open, that animals can move in the United States to the border. In Mexico, they will have the same coverage or protection from the border down. I mean, not the same as in the US because we have different laws, but just as they cross the border, they will have protection as like everybody, like everywhere else in Mexico. And it is important since the Mexican population is growing. Somebody stated that the Mexican population has not grown in over 20 years. Well, the Mexican population is just 10 years old because Mexico started the reintroduction in 2011, sorry. So again, just to explain my endorsement to what the Fish and Wildlife Service is doing in terms of this 10J rule, which is a big step forward to move. I mean, perhaps it's not 10 steps forward. I do agree with that, but I think it is an important step forward for the conservation of the Mexican wolf. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I'm going to go to Carolyn. She's spoken twice, but Michael, you've spoken 3 times, so keep hanging there. Carolyn Nelson.
Yes. So, if something in your argument is found false, then maybe you look at the other parts of your argument. So the saying that our permits are only $1 something per acre, that's the fee, and the fee was so that the Forest Service rangers would keep other ranchers off that allotment. Now, this is totally new to most people, but the reason, and this is a wolf issue because ranchers have rights on national forests. When people say that you can only buy, that ranches only pay, our grazing fees, we pay our grazing fees to the national forests so that, well, I won't tell you what each of it is for, but it goes to the county and to the Betterment Fund and to their salaries is what the fee goes for. But to buy the allotment, you have to have deeded land. You pay for the deeded land, 40 acres, and you'll get, and the allotment, the national forest, the allotment on the national forest is attached to it. So you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a ranch that these wolves come in and eat your property. And people, if somebody has lied to you about that, then maybe they're lying to you about the other information. Maybe wolves don't eat just the sick. Maybe wolves kill for fun and go to the next place and kill. Maybe ranchers do a lot more for these national forests than they are given credit. And maybe you're putting out people out of business who actually are helping the wildlife. I started to say my last time that there were, we've been in a terrible drought, and we could see hundreds of elk at night come in to some of the ponds. Tanks is what they're called, but they're like ponds that my husband has cleaned out with his own money, so our cattle can use, and so of course the elk can use. We've sold quite a bit of our cattle during the drought to manage so we don't overgraze it, but we can't do anything about the elk. And you say, oh, well, we'll bring in the wolf. Well, the wolf is going to eat the cow first. And so then you're going to we're not going to get refunded for what we put into these ranches. And so it needs, just like the fires are burning because the loggers were put out of business, maybe with putting the ranchers out of business, you're going to do the same thing. Who said crap?
No,
How come that was allowed?
No, I didn't. I said need to wrap up.
Oh.
My apologies for that sounding like it wasn't. Wendy Thuring hasn't spoken as much as Michael, so one last shot, and that will probably be our last comment.
Great, thank you. My name is still Wendy Thuring. It's still WENDY THURING. I just want to say that my hope is that, you know, it's a well-known fact that with the changing times and it being 2021, and there being a much larger majority people in the United States that are now vegan or will not eat beef or any other livestock animal, that your group is making these recommendations with this 10J rule, that you will actually get a group that actually pulls those true and actual numbers from the various organizations and agencies that have them, meaning like, you know, like the USDA or whatever, that will actually have those numbers of those that are vegan or not, you know what I mean, or still eating beef. But anyways, it's a well-known fact that a lot more Americans are not eating beef. They're not eating the, you know, the livestock animals. They're choosing fish. They're choosing, you know, vegetables, which is great. So the thing is, though, is that with the shrinking number of people, you know, having a desire for beef in America, I'm hoping that those numbers being allotted to those, you know, cattle to graze or whatever, that number will shrink too over time as less and less people eat meat or beef or livestock animals, and that those acres or miles or whatever are given to animals like the Mexican wolf who really desperately need it. So that's what I would like to say. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone for hanging in there with us. It's now the top of the hour, so I am going to just remind everyone one more time that please, if you have additional comments, submit those either through the regulations.gov portal or by mail, and or come back to the January 11th hearing, which will be set up very similar to this one. With that, Brady McGee, take us home.
All right, thank you. That concludes our information and public comment sessions for this evening. I would like to close by saying that the service remains committed to collaborative conservation for the Mexican wolf and all listed species. We recognize that future conservation of this subspecies only happens with the continued support of our federal, state, tribal, and local partners. And we thank them for their partnership, and we thank all of you for joining us today and for your interest in Mexican wolf. Thank you.